Good morning and welcome to everyone here at the courthouse. We're glad you're here to join us for our day 2 of Douglas County 2026 budget hearings. If you didn't join us yesterday, this is an opportunity for commissioners to ask questions of organizations and departments that have made funding requests or have been included in the county administrator's recommended budget. We go in sort of groupings, and this morning we'll start with law enforcement. That's at 9 o'clock. At 10 o'clock, we'll work with some of our justice partners. And then at 11 o'clock, we're with our heritage organizations and land conservation groups. We don't take public comment at our budget hearings. We do welcome public comment at any time. You're welcome to send us an email, give us a phone call. If you'd like to make public comment to the entire board, you're welcome to join us on Wednesday at our 5:30 business meeting when we have a public comment section as part of our agenda. Checking in with Sarah. Is there anything else from staff before we kick it off? Okay. So commissioners, we have, Katie. Okay. We'll have Katie sort of give us maybe a bit of an overview here.
Good morning, commissioners. Katie Fitzgerald, Criminal Justice Coordinator. I am happy to introduce your second day of budget hearings, which will open with our Sheriff's Office. Earlier this spring, you all received a very thorough overview from Sheriff Armbrister about the breadth of services his office provides to our community, from patrolling our roads to programming services within the jail, providing security in the courthouse, and newly added lake patrol. I think that overview and my experiences in particular show that our Sheriff's Office is a good example of adjusting to meeting and exceeding the needs of our partners and community when they are called upon. The 2026 supplemental budget requests of the Sheriff's Office reflect continuing to meet the needs of today and preparing to meet the needs of tomorrow. In previous budget years, we've spent time discussing the challenges of the Sheriff's Office in recruiting and retaining staff. You all responded to those challenges in 2023 with a competitive pay package, and those efforts have been largely successful for increasing and maintaining staffing levels within the Sheriff's Office. While the Sheriff's Office has been able to increase and maintain staff on the front lines, they have not increased the support staff, namely IT, at the same rate. To that end, you have a supplemental request for additional IT staff to support the technology needs associated with the increased deputy staffing within the Sheriff's Office. You also have a supplemental request for 4 deputies, 2 of whom, as Sarah mentioned yesterday, are for court security and have been included in the proposed 2026 budget. Of the remaining 2 deputies requested, 1 is requested to meet the increasing needs of warrant service. Staffing for this service has remained at 1 deputy for at least the last 27 years, despite an increased volume of warrants that need to be served. While there are efficiencies missed by having only 1 deputy in this service, serving warrants is often one of the most unpredictable and potentially unsafe situations for our law enforcement officers. An additional deputy for warrant service would enhance the safety of our deputies and increase the efficiency with which warrants are able to be served. As we look to tomorrow, the future of our Sheriff's Office, district court officials, and emergency services are grounded in the remodel of the Judicial and Law Enforcement Center and the addition of the Public Safety Building. These projects will be, particularly the LEC remodel, Law Enforcement Center remodel, will bring notable changes to how we, our justice system staff and partners, and the community experience the courthouse. Perhaps more significantly, the LEC remodel will bring notable changes to how that building remains safe and secure. Additional security will be needed to staff a control center, inmate holding area, providing transport between the courthouse and the jail, and maintaining security at the public entrance. As Sarah mentioned yesterday, the Sheriff's Office has requested 3 deputies to provide additional security needs for the LEC, and as I've already mentioned, she has included 2 of these in her proposed budget. So there remains a request for 1 additional court security deputy. With that, I will introduce our Sheriff's Office partners. So with you today, we have Under Sheriff Stacy Simmons, Major LaRonda Rome, Budget and Finance Coordinator Monica McKinley, and Major Gary Bunting.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that. Commissioners, do we have questions for our sheriff? Commissioner Reed says she does not. I'll just poke around a little bit here and I'm interested in this IT position that you're asking for. And as I went through the information, I noted like jail management as part of what you're needing the IT for. And I'm trying to get a sense of, you could talk just a little bit more about all the functions that this IT position is responsible for.
Sure, under Sheriff Sims. So yeah, these IT positions right now they're more jack of all trades than they are specifics. So what we're looking for really is somebody who can do cybersecurity, but our classifications right now are specific, and so we have to put one of those IT folks in one of those positions. So what we're wanting to hire is somebody who can just do the cybersecurity for the sheriff's office and really concentrate on that. Right now, we have multiple people doing multiple things. We have cybersecurity, we have working on the vehicles and all of our mobile data terminals. We have folks working just on dispatch. And so the sheriff's office is really broken up into two positions or two parts. One is the operations division and one is the corrections division. However, the IT works together as one unit. So everything that happens at the jail, everything that happens on the operations side are worked with the IT team collectively. And it's just getting way, way, way too much. We are holding on, but we're not meeting the future. We're not meeting what we have to do now. And so when we asked it last year for that position, we got other positions instead that were also very important. So we thank you for that. But these positions that we're asking for really are going to put us in a position to work ahead instead of just working at what comes at us. The sheriff's office is a 24/7. So while the sheriff's office has about 40% of county staff, county IT has about 13 positions that just work day shift. We have 6 that work 24/7. So these folks are on duty all the time. We have the entire records management system for the entire county's law enforcement. And we also have dispatch. So anything that happens with dispatch, we're also responsible for. Also, all of the jail and its records management and the sheriff's records management. Anything else you want to add with that? No? Okay. Anything else? Sorry, the major was over. Technology. So
That's fine. And maybe my next question then becomes for administration, because one of the things that administration is responsible for is looking at all the budget requests and making a recommendation. This was not included in your recommendation, Sarah, this IT position. One interpretation is that you were trying to keep us to a mill levy, to hold that mill levy flat. Another interpretation could be that we have IT staff that may be able to do some of this work. Can you talk about why you didn't include, it's a medium in there?
It's not, it's the first option you listed. I was very, very stringent on the requests that I included in my proposed budget, focusing mainly on what was absolutely necessary to get the buildings open, the expanded courthouse and the PSB. So I think above that, it's up to the commission to decide in terms of what gets included and its potential impact on mill levy.
So I'm talking about the IT positions, and
Right.
you're saying it's not needed to get the building open? Is that what you're saying?
That was my impression. Yeah, this is a request the sheriff's office has asked for a number of years. So it wasn't tied specifically to the expanded courthouse and the public safety building. This is related to just their ongoing IT needs and support, which I think is important and valid. And we're doing it. I mean, it's an important and valid request. It's just, I didn't include it in my proposed budget because it's a pretty high bar to get into mine. And I focused on janitorial and maintenance positions and security positions that are going to be needed when that building is operational.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
That's fine. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned some of this is for dispatch, and we charge a certain rate to cities and counties for dispatch, right? And for jail, and we charge certain rate, not counties, cities, municipalities. And then we charge a certain rate to our cities for the jail as well. Was there any consideration of increasing those rates to respond to this need?
I don't believe that there was, I don't know that we really thought about doing that. Specifically, I think those rates come from the year before and not something, and Sarah, maybe you can answer this, and not
Yeah.
something that's a future need. Is something that's the average daily population from the year before.
In
And that's how
both, so with the jail rate, it's a 3-year average of the costs. So if the commissioners add this, but it would need to be assigned to the jail, not to operations, it would eventually filter its way into the daily rate that the cities pay. On the ECC side, I know the sheriff's office has worked really hard to make sure that ECC gets the tech support it needs. We do have a position in their budget that is provided, that's costed to the ECC budget, that is under the sheriff's IT team, and that is a part of the distribution that go to the municipalities that pay for ECC. So we do get some cost recovery in that sense.
Well, that left me confused a little bit. You say it's a 3-year average, but are we re-evaluating that every year?
Yeah, so every year we say, here's what it costs to run the jail. And then we take 3 years of that and we average it and come up with a daily rate. So each year, if costs go up because of cost of living and merit, it's incorporated in that year. So every year the rate changes, but it's based off a 3-year average of what the cost was.
Oh, I got the impression it hadn't changed
Nope,
for a
it
year.
changes
Okay.
every year.
Thank you.
But it's not, if there was a spike, say in a particular year, it's average, you wouldn't feel that immediately because we take 3 years of that. So that this municipalities, so it's a little more normalized and there's not quite as many spikes. And just for background for commissioners, we adjusted that rate a couple years back. It had been a long time since it had been changed. And it was what I call half of a bad rate. It didn't include all the costs associated with it. I would note that this doesn't include, we don't charge overhead for that amount. So commissioners are familiar with these conversations when it comes to LDCFM and ECC. We pay a 10% administrative overhead rate to the city for those services. They pay a 10% administrative overhead for our ECC rate. In this situation, we don't move any of the costs for payroll, underlying network support, maintenance, anything that's in those budgets doesn't get passed on to the cities. It's purely the operational cost of the jail. Yeah. I would say it's a pretty fair rate compared to what other jails charge. So it is higher than, say, the cities pay more than they would pay like in Ottawa for the Franklin County Jail.
What is the rate currently?
Like $209 a day. Yeah, do you know, Major?
The current daily rate is $265.96.
And it is more expensive than, say, some of the smaller areas surrounding us because we do provide mental health 24 hours, medical 24 hours. And so there's other services that these other facilities don't have.
By comparison, what does Anderson County charge us if we send a prisoner there?
Know that we know that off the top of our head. We could get you some of those if you want. I'd rather have us check and make sure we know before we say publicly.
We haven't been housing with Anderson County, but we have been, what's one of the ones that we've had recently? Okay. And do you know how much? $75 a day.
Can you talk a little bit about how the sheriff's office IT interacts with county IT? Is there any overlap in support that goes between those two?
Our IT are very separate.
You'll have to get closer to the mic.
Very separate. Yeah, they do very different things than we do from a law enforcement perspective, and all of the different requirements that we have through like Highway Patrol, federal state laws and things like that that we're required to do for law enforcement. And so they don't have any of, well, they may have some of that with the clerk's office, but we're very, there's a line and they kind of have their lane and we have ours.
Now, what I would say though, is there's a lot of collaboration, and particularly on the hardware and network fiber situations, those types of, phones, that type of cabling, that's work. We, our two agencies partner closely together.
Yeah, thank you. We do, phones, copy machines, the contract. When the new building at the public safety building, I think we're sharing a network area, which normally is very separate, but for costs, there's some things out there because we have dispatch and sheriff's office, and then they're going to have EOC. So we're working collaboratively on those things, that they'll still be separate. You'll still have your different email addresses and all of those things, but
Who manages radios? Is that under ECC? Is that under Sheriff's Office, or is that each department separately?
ECC has those. We purchase some of our own radios. There was money afforded to ECC for radios to try to get through the encryption. And so we work really closely with Tony Foster on those kinds of things. And we purchased several of our own radios last year to help with that cost. But as far as working through the yearly maintenance and things like that, that would be dispatch.
So does dispatch then cover that for, which is also then under your IT budget, cover that for all the jurisdictions that are using radios through ECC in the county, or does each individual organization kind of manage that cost and that IT process?
I believe the Lawrence Police Department has their own folks, and I believe that Eudora and Baldwin.
It's a little
Come to
different
us.
depending on it. And Tony will be here tomorrow and can tell us more.
Okay, thanks.
Does the sheriff's office engage in interagency sharing? From a technology and IT perspective,
As far as like the Lawrence Police Department, Eudora, Baldwin.
and or with the county and or community-based organizations, when we take a look at data and reporting?
Oh, absolutely. The sheriff's office is pretty much the end game on all of that.
Yeah.
Everything that's reported really comes through the sheriff's office. And so all of those statistics, all of those, everything it's all of our dashboards, like if the Lawrence Police Department makes an arrest and it comes to the jail, then we report out. And I think
So when we take a look at the IT that you currently have, is that adequate to support currently and then as we look forward? So that's what I'm looking at.
I think that's down right now. Because we're having some issues and we need to kind of revamp that. But yes, that's part of IT's job as well.
Criminal
So
Justice Coordinating
is to work-
Council has identified data as its top priority in its new strategic plan. So they're reviewing all of the data, all the information, all the dashboards, and making sure that it's correct and that we're showing it and showing those measures accurately.
And that does come through our record management system.
Okay, and as we look at the requests that your department has, is that connected to all this work?
Yes.
It is,
It is.
okay. So then as we look at this work moving forward, if it were not to be funded, how would that affect all of this work moving forward?
We would need to prioritize what is most important for the sheriff's office
And what
for
would
our
be
daily
most-
needs,
Okay.
which would be our mobile data terminals in our vehicles, our cybersecurity, our records management system, just our computer system to keep reports functioning. So some of these things would need to take a backseat, I guess you could say. Not that they're not important, but because we work collaboratively, they are somebody else's top priority. So we'll have to work to kind of figure out what's going to get done and what's not.
So I'm hearing that it's very important.
It is very important. I mean, I don't know that I could say one thing is less important than another for all the things that we do for the sheriff's office, but the sheriff's office is no longer just what we do. I feel like at times we're kind of a hub for so many other stakeholders in our community and what they need and how they prioritize is based off information that we provide, and systems and who's being arrested and homelessness and all of those things. Because I mean, we even do a demographic month, every month, and it talks about homelessness and who lives where and how many people live at the shelter. And so those folks get that email and then they work with that email to figure their budgets and their things and how they're working with the community members. And so it's just kind of this giant spider web.
Commissioner, I was been thinking about your questions related to data and presenting it publicly from yesterday and today. And I would say that if we're really going to do those things, we're going to have to make a massive investment in our IT infrastructure and have a lot of conversations with community partners about reporting. Everybody uses a different software system. Everybody has a different method of tracking. It's these kinds of efforts to get this stuff is going to be pretty time intensive and labor intensive. And I think our staff right now is really trying to keep our network up, manage safe, allow people to function and operate daily, for software to operate and function in daily, but to go to that next level of reporting and ease of reporting data so that you're not just retyping things from one spreadsheet to another. It's going to require a massive investment in both the sheriff's office and in IT, and perhaps even with our community partners, because they really don't have IT support in many cases to do that type of work.
Well, I think these are important conversations to have with our community because we are spending public dollars, taxpayer dollars, to really understand if this is something that our community wants. Because I do consistently hear when individuals do come in and speak to us that it does appear that our community is asking for transparency, that they're asking for dashboards. But obviously, we still need to have these conversations with our community and our community partners to understand if they have the capabilities to actually move that forward and to understand if everyone does truly want this. So I would like us to have these conversations and to understand where that does fit into the budget, if it does fit within opioid dollars, possibly, because we would be taking a look at possibly reporting on Matt, right? Possibly reporting on a lot of that work within the dashboard, or maybe taking a look at, does it sit within the behavioral health tax? Because we would be reporting on a lot of that work as well, and how we could incentivize positive outcomes at the local level. So I think we have a lot of opportunities to understand how we could fund that work collaboratively together, and or maybe we partner with community foundations to really understand how we come together from a philanthropy perspective to really collectively address a dashboard to really bring people together to show the outcomes collectively, use the word collective again, to really show positive outcomes for our community, right? And how we are together impacting this so that we're not siloed. Because as you said, right, it's individual organizations that are typing up reports, right, in a bubble, right, showing their impact. But really, it's all of us coming together doing this work.
Yeah, just from the jail's perspective, from the sheriff's office perspective, we have our reentry team. We have mental health. We have Mir, and we have Burton Ash, all in the facility right now. And they're all doing different work, as well as drug court, which we're involved in, mental health court. And I think veterans court is about to start. Yeah, possibly start. So all of those, just those things, and the demographic of homelessness and drug use, mental health. And so we could be reporting out on a lot of things, and those things are going into our system. It's just being extracted is an issue.
I have another question. Can you talk to us about the startup requirements for the new PSB and the JLE from an IT perspective, like what that burden will look like?
Sure. So we're still working through some of the issues down in the Brig, which is the mini jail underneath. We're having conversations right now about what that looks like on an IT perspective of doors and key cards. But there's just in that area alone, there's I don't know, 15 key carded or locked doors, in addition to cell doors. And then we have elevators that are also carded and many areas within the courtrooms where we'll be taking those for court in and out. So just that perspective. We're also having a second station in when folks come in for X-ray. And then obviously a lot more computers will be in at the public safety building for all of our staff. Right now, we just have a few computers for our deputies, but they will all have one at their own workstations in addition to the ones in their car. So they'll be adding those. And so we'll be adding a lot more infrastructure in those buildings, more at the PSB than at this one here at the law enforcement center.
But I would add, and when Starla and Jimmy come talk to you under core services, they can talk more about this. But every courtroom has pretty advanced AV. There is going to be ECC will have conversations about consoles. I think right now the plan is to move existing consoles over, which is going to be interesting during the transition because we think the state is going to be buying us new consoles or contributing to new consoles soon. So keep asking this question as we go through this week and you'll get a fuller picture.
Right. The AV at the new building for the sheriff's office is going to be something we've actually never had before. So there's a lot there as well with screens and ways to feed in for conferencing and those types of things. So that'll be ours. And like Sarah said, there's going to be a lot on the county side as far as the courtrooms and camera systems. Where the sheriff's office will have the camera systems as well, which we've added, I don't know, 3 times as many cameras now for this building over here, as well as parking and those kinds of things. So it'll be an up-to-date safety security building.
Okay, I appreciate that. And kind of my follow-up question was also going to be of this particular building, the judicial and law enforcement building, what will fall under county IT and what will fall under sheriff's office IT? Because some of those, like the key card things, like if that's throughout the building, does that then fall under the county or would that fall under sheriff?
Yeah.
Sheriff is responsible for security but works collaboratively with IT because we all work together really well on this.
Yeah. So we'll have more doors. We take care of that, the key card system and the security of that. So those cameras then will all be sheriff's office as well, just here. And then at the public safety building as well, there'll be cameras on the outsides of those buildings. And so basically it's like this, the new building next door here and then a mini building out. Same thing, just a smaller footprint. So.
Yeah. And actually we had a conversation recently about key card access and the software company. So, we're evaluating all those options that may impact how we look at the county as a whole, because it would be easier for if we don't have one building on one system and another building on another system. So, those decisions are made collaboratively with the sheriff's office, IT and maintenance and our building folks.
We have a great relationship with all of those folks. And we met just yesterday about some of those things. And there is a company out there that says they can do it all, but then all companies say they can do it all. But it's a possibility that they could even do the jail with the doors and things that we have now. So it could be a one-stop shop, but that's down the road. We're not getting too excited about it right now. So.
That's all the questions I had about that position.
Go ahead.
Just gonna say I saw a little bit of excitement there under sheriff. So yeah.
I don't know if this is a Sarah question or for you, but could you walk me through the salary adjustments of the last 2 or 3 years? I think it was 23, 424, where you came asking for some increases due to retention. And could somebody just walk me through all of that?
So I'll start with that. And then you know, the intricate details of everything else. But yeah, so the sheriff came to the commission a few years ago because the salaries for just the security staff, which is corrections officers and law enforcement officers, was low. It was very low. We were having trouble competing with every law enforcement agency around here that was comparable to our size or greater. Johnson County, which you can't compete with because they just keep raising their rates. But so the sheriff came, worked closely with Sarah and her staff to get those positions, those pay positions up. And we were down about 25% of our staff. We couldn't hire. Right now, I think with this Corrections Academy have going on right now, we're down 6 now. And we'll have that filled also probably by the end of the year. So those raises were needed. So we appreciate that. And also just to kind of a side note, about 10 months later, we now have about 13 new little babies in our law enforcement family. So people can afford diapers and some things now. So thank you. But yeah, so we got those raises and we are doing an outstanding job right now trying to fill those spots. We will have those spots filled by the end of the year. And then once that took place, it was like maybe a year and a half later, then the rest of the county staff then got the pay package increase with all of the work.
So were you included in that or no?
No.
No. So
No.
when that second pay package came and all the work was done again for all the other county employees, then corrections and law enforcement was not involved in that.
Okay, but this year they're in that?
No, they did not receive increases in 2024 related
Oh,
to.
I mean in 26.
Yes, in the market merit increases that we're showing in the 26 budget would include law enforcement and the sheriff, all of the sheriff's office and criminal justice services.
Okay,
So that is budgeted for countywide.
okay, thanks. Oh, so with the higher increase in pay, your retention has been better?
Yeah, it's incredible. We've had a few folks leave either for family reasons or retirements, or they've chosen to do things that we don't appreciate. And so they've moved on. But yeah, we don't have the issue of just people coming and going, which is costly for us because it's about $20,000 per corrections officer to hire and even more for the law enforcement with all the gear and training. So yeah, we're saving money that way. And yeah, our retention is excellent.
Once you're fully staffed, will overtime go down or is there some overtime built in?
There's some overtime built in the budget. It has gone down significantly every year. And I think it's been 750,000 at some points and we've gone over that. I think last year we had asked for 500. I think we're kind of on track to hit that this year, but we dropped that down to 350 on both sides next year, but I don't see us meeting that. There are always going to be overtime assignments like the fair and some of those things for our staff, transports and things like that. But our overtime has gone down drastically, just trying to fill shift spots.
Do your officers work KU events?
They do. KU does pay us for those though.
Have they adjusted their rate in the last few years?
They have.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Any other questions, commissioners?
Okay, I forgot one question I had coming into this and then one more came up. So the question I had coming into this was related to the warrants officer and need. I guess 2 questions. One, is there any process in place? So the narrative talked about having to do a monthly sort of random audit or review and to verify some warrants. Are there other entities that are participating in that at all that have any role to play in checking for warrants and whether or not they are continue to be valid. I guess I'm trying to understand a little bit like the sort of influx, and the influx is constant. I'm wondering if there, other than serving warrants, are there any other mechanisms in which the warrants are coming off of that list by dismissals or retracting them? I mean, just can you help me understand some of that flow and if there's help in reviewing that sort of ever-growing list?
Yeah, so warrants is a little complicated entity. We have folks that sit in the warrants division that are civilian employees. And what they do is they take those warrants from the courts and they enter those. And they have to enter those into the National Crime database so that somebody in Florida, if they find somebody that has a warrant in Douglas County, will come up. So there's multiple things they have to do with these warrants. So if the judges retract these warrants for any reason, those folks take those warrants out of the system. And so we're talking about civilians and what they do. So it's a lengthy process. They also have audits monthly. I don't know what it's called. Yeah, they have a case CJIS audit. So basically, the state will randomly just send 50 checks. And it'll say, we need you to check these warrants. They have to go back and they have to go back into the system and make sure that the address is still valid, the person's still valid, the date of birth is still valid, and do all of those things again. There are more warrants coming than being served. Now, so the sheriff's office is responsible. Any law enforcement officer can arrest on a warrant, but the sheriff's office is statutorily required to serve these warrants. So that one warrants officer goes out every day, tries to pick basically the highest level warrants that they can to serve these warrants, to try to track these folks down so that the victims can have some closure. And we can get this system, we can get these folks going into the system. Our patrol unit can also do that. They're normally out doing their patrol functions, but they can serve warrants and they do serve warrants as well. What I think the main reason we're asking for an additional staff person is, one, when we're trying to serve these felony warrants, they're dangerous. And two, there are victims waiting for some closure, whatever closure that is, whether that's a dismissal, whether that's a plea, probation, trial, it doesn't make a difference to us as long as they're getting some closure and those folks have their day in court as well. So not sure if that answers your question.
It does. I have
Okay.
a couple follow-ups.
Sure.
Thank you for filling in some color there about the process. And the distinction between, and we talked about civilian staff in the past related to the processing and that's an administrative
Yes.
burden for sure. The warrants deputy that you currently have is separate or the same as civil process?
Separate.
Okay, I
Yes.
just want to make
The-
that distinction too.
yeah.
So they're not carrying both those workloads in a day. But patrol has been helping absorb some of the warrant service related to
Yeah.
the need. If you were to have that position, do you envision that there would just be some occasions by which two deputies would be going together, since you're talking about some, safety concerns and high-risk felony arrest, but otherwise, or felony warrant, otherwise it would not necessarily be, they would be sharing the workload and it would.
Right. On some of those felony warrants, those higher felony warrants, they would go out together separately, but meet together. But most of the time they would be going out and trying to clear some of those warrants
Got it.
individually.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I would follow up on that. So typically, even with hiring an additional person to serve warrants, they would still be going separately most of the time to speed up the process of
Yeah.
serving, but occasionally go together for that safety concern.
Yeah, and they would more than likely meet together, or they could ride in the same vehicle, but most of the time they would be, hey, we're going to try to do this today. Meet me over at this address, and we're going to try to arrest this individual.
Okay,
So-
great. I appreciate that. I got more of an either or in the
Yeah. Yeah, it
Very
wouldn't
good.
be, it wouldn't be just two deputies riding around in the same car all day. You kind of defeat a little bit of the purpose of getting an extra, but because there are so many warrants, there really are. And a lot of these aren't person crimes, but there's still, they need to be taken care of.
Make sure you use the microphone. You push the button.
No, no.
There you go.
Appreciate it. There you go.
Okay. Also, for the civilian staff, I know a lot of them have been working overtime just to get them entered into the national database that they have a deadline. I think it's 24 hours or something, but they've been complaining about that a little bit.
And the only warrants that are being entered are ones that are signed by judges in the 7th Judicial District.
That's correct. Yeah, the municipal warrants are through the Lawrence Municipal Court, and those warrants are out there. And so if a law enforcement officer comes across somebody, but yes, the only ones that we work on as a sheriff's office civilian staff, and that we go out and actively try to find are the district court warrants.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And then my other question goes back to the IT discussion. Would one position be better than none?
One position would be better than none.
Okay,
Thanks. And two will be better than one. But yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
I had one more question. I think this is a Sarah question. Does Public Works allocate out to the Sheriff's Department gasoline cost? Or do you just keep that all in one big bucket?
We manage gas and fleet centrally.
Thanks.
The Sarah question, but it will tag back. What is the anticipated opening for the JLE and the public safety building? And I'm looking at in terms of, we've got positions that are tagged to the increased need there, but when does that need begin?
Well, it depends. So what I would say is for some of the security issues, as soon as, we're under construction in that building, that makes the situation worse. So I'd say once the tower opens and we begin renovating the existing JLE, it's going to get harder to keep that building secure with people in and out, departments moving around. So I would anticipate though that's mid-year next year. So I don't want to be any more precise than that at this point, but we think by mid-year 2026, we will have folks in PSB in some form or fashion, and that we will be done with the tower and we will begin the renovation internally in the courthouse.
So mid-year 2026, but not the full year of 2026.
Which is why I budgeted for the maintenance positions for a half year. I didn't put a half year on the sheriff's positions because that wasn't part of the request, but that's a conversation the commission can have with the sheriff.
So that's my question then, is when does the need really ramp up in your perspective?
Yeah, I think when the tower opens, the need will open. Because when the tower opens, then there's additional holding areas that will be having those people that are incarcerated coming up and going down. We can't leave those folks by themselves in those areas because they're hooked to the courtrooms. So I would say when that tower opens, we'll be ready to go.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
I got a follow-up question on that.
Sure.
Would, for those positions, would you tend to promote internally out of the jail, or would you go outside?
Internally, our practice has normally been, I mean, there's always a couple exceptions, but our practice has been that we hire corrections officers and they're in the jail for a few years until they're eligible to promote. And then we can, basically can vet them, and they've done what we asked them to do. They've been a part of the sheriff's office. And then when they're ready to promote, we send them to the academy and then they become deputies. And that's kind of how we've backfilled everything. Like right now we're down 6 deputies. And so we will hire from corrections, and we we have a few at the academy right now, and then a few more will go later, and then we'll fill the correction spots.
I was just wondering about the training burden, even though you're promoting from within, there's a training element to going to court security, right?
Yes, there is. And there's a training burden essentially that it is a double-edged sword, really. They get promoted, but they're gone for 4 or 5 months. And so we have to fill those spots with overtime if need be until they get back. And then they go through a training program, and then they can go to court security, train with the court security officer. So they're, again, basically a 2-person car. And then they're on their own until they go to patrol. And then they're back in a 2-person car until they train again.
So with that, even if you don't need them till mid-year, you're probably hiring or promoting January or February to give them time to
Yeah.
leave and come back.
Yeah. And then train in the building. And then, yes. Thank you.
Now, from an IT perspective, I believe I heard that an interagency dashboard is currently down. Is that what I heard? That it's not currently up and running?
Okay. It's about to be revamped. There's some
Being
things we need to
Okay.
work on, and we're actually in discussions right now about how we want to move forward with that.
Okay,
With
so
that
from
data.
that perspective, that need is a now need.
That is a now need, yes.
Okay, all right, so 2 IT individuals would be ideal.
Yes, it would. Or just the sheriff's office daily needs that we're doing our best to keep up with. Again, we're 24/7. And so our 6 folks have to take care of all those things 24 hours a day. And then all of the other aspects of the sheriff's office, like in that spider web, it's something that we could use help with.
Okay, so that's not a mid 2026.
That is not. I would say neither of these positions are mid 2026.
Okay,
for
thank you.
right
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
I have a clarifying question for Sarah. So I took the fact that you marked that request for the 4 deputies was half funded as 2 deputies were funded. But 2 deputies.
2
for half a
deputies.
year,
Full year.
full year.
2
Okay.
deputies, full
Both
year
of them had
26.
stuck Out to me, and then I
Yeah.
just got thrown by what I thought I heard you say about.
No, just the maintenance positions were half year.
Okay, thank you. That's where I got lost. Appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, I think the question was when would we absolutely need them? We would absolutely need them when the tower started, but like Commissioner Dorsey just said, they have to still train and do all the things. So it would be nice to have those at the beginning of the year.
Any other questions, commissioners? Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. We're going to take a short 13-minute break before we begin at 10 o'clock with our justice partners. Welcome back. It's 10 o'clock. And so we're visiting now with the group we refer to as the Justice League. These are all of our justice partners. So this includes district court, district attorney. I wish that was my joke, but it was really Sarah's. I have to give her credit for that. Kansas Holistic Defenders. We also have Criminal Justice Services here. Doesn't look like they are. No? Okay. They're on our list here. And CJCC, which Katie is here as well. Okay. Katie, do you have a brief overview for us to begin?
I do. Good morning again, commissioners. I'll try not to repeat what Commissioner Kelly he took the first part. I was going to introduce everyone. As you all know, we've had a turnover in the district attorney's office following the elections last year. And so I would welcome DA Loomis to his first budget cycle with the county. I'm going to do my introduction a little backwards than how I normally do. So I'm going to highlight the supplemental requests that you have from our departments and then share some feedback about these partners. So for this group of departments, you have supplemental requests from our district attorney's office and from our district court. The district attorney's office and all of these, all four of these requests are related primarily to staffing. So for district court, one request is to make the eviction diversion coordinator position permanent and full-time. This was a position that we received in, I believe, 2023 through a grant with the National Center for State Courts. And over the life of that grant, the position has the funding for that position has been kind of titrating down from 100% to over the course of our fiscal year 2026, that funding and that grant will end. And so the district court is requesting to bring that position on full-time. And the other request that you have from district court is related to a cost increase for panel attorneys who take child in need of care or SINC cases. Attached to the supplemental request is a lot of information documenting kind of the reason for this request and the background that district court received from Kansas Legal Services. For our district attorney's office, you have two supplemental requests. One, they have a currently allocated part-time assistant district attorney position that the request is to make that position full-time with a particular focus on helping to increase efficiency of charging decisions and also to take on more of the complex criminal cases. So this is a little bit more of a kind of specialized, or would become a little more specialized position than just an assistant district attorney. The second request that you have from our district attorney's office is for an additional legal assistant to focus on the juvenile justice caseload. This is a position that previously under prior administrations we had, and the position was reclassified into a victim witness specialist. However, there is kind of a need to support our ADAs who are working in that juvenile space they need the legal assistant position back for support. So those are the four requests from our departments that you have. In last year's budget hearings, I shared about the perseverance and resilience of our court partners during the challenging events of the prior year, which included the onboarding and subsequent cyber attack of Odyssey, fire and floods in the basement of the LEC. It was hard to top that this year, but I'm not sure that that is a bad thing. I usually start working on these introductions 4 to 6 weeks before. It takes me a while to kind of process and think about how do I want to introduce my partners to you all and to the public. As I thought about that process this year and how to introduce this group, I kept sitting with the same theme that our court partners have maintained operations in the status quo this year, which does not sound very exciting. Until a couple of weeks ago, I received an email from Judge McCabery that I think highlights what the status quo of our justice system partners is. And I'd like to share that with the commission and any of the public who is watching or who watches this later. This email was submitted through the district court's web inquiry form on their website. And it reads, I've been practicing for 25 years in criminal law, Kansas and Missouri. I just finished up a matter in Douglas County. From my interactions with the criminal clerk's office, and Ian in particular, to the DA's office, to the sheriff's office that double-checked that my client's warrant was removed earlier this morning, I have never spoken with a more professional and welcoming group of people. There's just a great vibe there. I wish I had more Douglas County cases. I'm not sure who to tell, but it means a lot when law enforcement especially, and the courts and the prosecutor's office act in a way that properly balances and serves everyone in the criminal justice system. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm not sure that I can top that. I was really appreciative that Judge McCabery shared that with me. The sheriff's office also received that, and so I did double check that, which is why I didn't talk about that earlier. But I think this is a really great group of partners, and it's always a privilege for me when I get to work with them. So with that, I would turn this back to you, Commissioner Kelly.
Thanks for sharing that, Katie. That's great. That's really wonderful. Okay, so we have District Court, District Attorney, and Kansas Holistic Defenders who have supplemental requests. Turn it over to commissioners if you want to start questions. I started the last round, so whoever wants to start this one, not that I'm keeping track.
Okay, I'll start. This is for a district court question. This is about the eviction resolution coordinator position. And that started with that grant funding. But we had Douglas County had a match that went into that grant. Is that correct? Can you just remind me what was the process of, it was not 100% grant funded. It either ramped up or ramped down.
So the first year was 100%. And then the second year was 75%. Then we went to 50%. So we're on, I think, 25% right now. And so we're just looking at supplementing, and the county had funded the other portion. And so that's why we shared all of the good work that Adelaida has accomplished within that period of time.
All right, thank you. I'll ask another. So how does that position integrate with self-help? Are there collaborations between those two, or are there opportunities for more collaboration?
Very good question. And yes, there is. So it's integral to our self-help because any individuals who are there for the limited civil answer docket or are needing assistance with eviction come into self-help. So we have Adelaida that staff our self-help so that any individual who is there who has those needs is available. And she also helps with other individuals.
So do most people come to that, come out asking for that help? They come through self-help, and that's how they get flagged for help through the eviction coordinator?
So if you saw any of the attachments, we try to make sure that we communicate as soon as any case is filed so that people know that self-help is available for them. And we also have an answer docket, which individuals have an opportunity to decide whether they're going to deny or admit the allegations within the case. And then at that point, we also have Adelaida there to talk to them in case they want to talk to her before they answer, and then again after.
So in terms of a person that's facing eviction having counsel, is this kind of an in-between step? I mean, this isn't fully legal counsel for that person. It's just somebody to help through the process. Is that correct?
So it is not legal counsel. Adelaida is not an attorney. So the opportunity there is to understand what their rights are and to understand the process more so. So it's legal information. But the opportunity is with Kansas Legal Services to make an appointment with an attorney if they so choose.
And how much of that need is covered by Kansas Legal Services?
That I do not know the answer to your question. I'm sorry. I can ask Adelaida and respond after this.
I'd say there's a lot of things going on around eviction, and so it's probably a fuller conversation than just district court as well. So.
Morning, Linda. Morning, Judge. Okay, I have some questions about this request, the eviction resolution coordinator position. Just to clarify and make sure I heard you right, Linda, you said, so 100% the first year we funded it, and then we went down to 50% of the position was funded by Douglas County, and then down to 25%. Is that what I heard you say? And
If I remember right, I think it didn't track with our budget
Yeah,
year,
that's what
so
I'm trying
that
to
makes it a little more
clarify.
complicated.
Sorry. Brandy obviously was far more fluent in this than I, but I have all of that information.
It is, because it's a federal grant, it followed the federal fiscal year cycle. And so I think every year we've had to kind of adjust because it's 2/3 of
That's correct.
their funding is kind of 2/3 essentially, or 3/4 of our fiscal year. And then so those adjustments are, as Commissioner Willie said, don't match up because they were paying on federal years and we were on a different fiscal year.
So Brooke looked it up. We're at 50-50 right now. So the general fund is absorbing 50% of the position in the general fund right now.
Thank you. And what's the status on the federal grant with that? I know we talked about this a little earlier this year and I just can't remember what how much more time.
So with that federal grant, and it's actually a National Center for State Court grant, we were funded for 2 years, and then you had the option to apply to get the funding for the third. And we are only the second court in Kansas who has that funding, or had that funding, because actually Sedgwick County did not get re-upped after their second year. We were the only court that did. And so we got funded for the third
The
year.
third year. Okay, that's what I thought I was remembering. I just couldn't remember if it was 3 years or a third year was what was in my head. And thank you for clarifying. Okay.
And while you're gathering, I just want to say, commissioners, this is an area as your administrator that sometimes I have a lot of concern with, because oftentimes we apply for grants and it's like a kid walking in a candy store and it seems really cheap and easy. And then the money goes away and we're left holding the bag if you want to continue the service. So I get really concerned. That's why all grants have to come to you to be approved, because oftentimes on the back end, there's, like in this situation, we can't apply again. It's meant for startup costs, and it's meant then for you all to really love the position and put local taxpayer dollars towards it.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so I have a handful of questions about this because, to be candid, I found this request hard to follow. And so there's some statements that I'm confused by and I'm hoping to get some clarity about. And this is a quote that's in this. I want to understand how the Self-Help Center has, quote, prevented eviction early through referrals to HSC, mediation, and attorneys. Can you help me understand like how you know that and what exhibits that you have helped prevent eviction early through those referrals? Do you have any numbers to back up the referrals or ability to correlate that to prevention?
Where are you reading from? Sorry.
It's in just the 1-page narrative supplemental request. It's in the description of request. It's a pretty short paragraph.
Thank you.
I'm going to say that Brandy actually wrote that, so I'm trying to make sure that I understand. But what I believe she was trying to say is all of the work that Adelaida has done to work with the sheriff's office so that we could get information to individuals as soon as a filing, and that she's working on trying to get information beforehand and trying to work through a variety of, we'll say, opportunities, whether it's mediation, et cetera, in order to provide an opportunity for individuals. She utilized kind of the numbers of where we've been, and I think she attached those. If not,
I don't think we had any attached information, and I'll be honest, I went back, like we have the information, the resource information that gets provided with summons through the sheriff's office and that we have talked about previously, but we don't have any sort of outcome reporting. And when we had our work session with Self-Help Center earlier this spring, frankly, there was not a lot of information about outcomes then either. So I looked back a little bit at that and I just couldn't really correlate how we can assert that it's been contributing to eviction prevention.
So I think Brandy looked back at our eviction filings and our dismissal orders and our writs of restitution and showed the change between when we had Adelaida and when we did not have this position. And there's been what we consider to be a significant change. And I can share all of that data with you.
Yeah, I see you holding some pages and I would like to see those because those are not familiar to me. So if you
Yes.
could get those.
I will send that to.
Yeah, you just email it to us, Linda, and we'll get it to all
I
commissioners.
will get that done.
Thank you. Also, well, you just talked a little bit about this, how Self-Help has coordinated the sheriff's summons handout, and we have an example of that. or I guess Brandy in writing this quoted that there was a 3% increase in court appearances related to that. And I'm just curious, is that like a stated goal in the grant, the National State Courts grant that specifically achieved a 3% increase in court appearances in 5 months by coordinating Douglas County Sheriff's Office service or summons and handouts? And I'm just curious if that's pretty specific numbers. So I'm curious if that's related to a goal or outcome that.
And again, I apologize because I don't know that specifically
Okay.
from the grant, but I will ask that of Adelaida and make sure that we respond to all of you. I'll send it to Sarah.
Okay, thanks. And then the last part of that sentence is by coordinating the sheriff's service summons handouts and ensuring every tenant spoke with an attorney. That's news to me. So I would like to can you elaborate on that? Every tenant spoke with an attorney?
Actually, I have information on that.
Okay, if you, Sam, can you just like introduce yourself and set up why you might have some information to share?
Yeah, I'm Sam Allison Natai. I'm the executive director of Kansas Holistic Defenders. Our office has a grant through the OJA's Access to Justice program, which allows us to have a full-time attorney specializing in eviction defense. We have that attorney along with our paralegal and intake specialist, often 2 attorneys, one of which is me, at every single eviction answer docket. We speak to every single person that comes to those dockets that wish to speak to us. We provide brief service immediately. And then depending on capacity, we can really only take between 2 and 4 cases for full representation each week. We will then take on those people for full representation. As far as I know, KLS does not do any eviction defense cases in Kansas. I mean, not in Kansas, in Douglas County. I believe they have, I think maybe they took 2 last year. I pulled up the data while we were talking on ours, and just sort of I just ran quickly from July to July, we have 67 cases of eviction defense. I can pull the statistics on those, but our offices are the attorneys that are speaking to people. And so it is true that aside from people who don't want to speak to us or who don't come, we speak with and advise, and where there's conflicts, every single tenant who is facing eviction.
Every single tenant who appears at the answer docket.
Yes.
So a more accurate statement is that every tenant in the past maybe year or possibly the extent so far of this eviction, well, maybe not actually, at least in the past year, from what you're telling me, Sam, thank you for the quick jump in and data check on your end, that every tenant who has showed up to the answer docket and appeared there has spoken with an attorney by way of Kansas Holistic Defenders being present to provide outreach. And there are some referrals that come from the Self-Help Center directly, maybe previous to that answer docket or at the answer docket, but that's what I'm understanding correctly. Does that track, Linda? Okay. And then, and how long have you had that Access to Justice grant, Sam? So when did you start going and having a presence at those dockets for outreach?
I believe we started that in October of 2023. The program ran all of last year, and we just submitted our renewal for this year, which we hope to hear back in September.
Okay. And fall 2023 is about when we started the eviction coordinator position opened, right? Okay, just to make sure I'm tracking those timelines. Thank you. And then there was something in here about, it says the Self-Help Center reached 1,859 people total. I'm assuming that means Brandy, 50% share of volunteer supervision unlocked $25,000 in service value at 0 cost to the county. That also is it's kind of a bold statement in my opinion, and I'm trying to unpack and understand how, is that something that is tracked, or that you have more data to show us about that supervision of attorneys, and if those attorneys are actively providing advice to and or support with tenants? that is resulting in $25,000 value of legal advice or legal representation. That's sort of what it alludes to, but I have to say that statement is very confusing to me.
I don't think that she meant to imply that. I think what she meant to imply was that the volunteers that she equated to, she looked at what the average hourly rate is given to a volunteer's hours that they present to whatever organization that is, and to say that 25,000 was towards the self-help center, not towards the volunteer attorneys.
Oh, I didn't understand that 25,000 was like paid. I guess I'm trying to unpack this. Like, first of all, is the 1,859 people total, is that tenants only, since this is a specific request related to tenants and
No.
eviction
No,
resolution?
that was total.
Okay. So this, 50% of volunteer supervision and that dollar value that was assigned to it is not tenant specific. It's just an overall, this is how many people Self-Help Center
That is correct.
had talk with an attorney for some degree of advice or other.
May or may not have spoken
May.
to attorney. That's the intakes that they had.
Okay. And then you had some information, there's some information here about, it says the coordinator provides referrals to specialized services such as OJA funded attorneys, Kansas Legal Services, and mediation programs, eliminating service duplication and maximizing taxpayer funds. The specialized services, the OJA funded attorneys, is that specific to eviction, or is that the access to justice grant that
That's
we're
the
talking
access to
about? Okay, just making sure I'm connecting those dots. And then mediation is still building to peace. Is that a program that is still in place with district court, or an agreement that is in place related to tenant landlord mediation? Is that happening?
To the best of my knowledge, it is. And they're actually expanded into small claims and trying to address landlord eviction cases within small claims.
If there's any updated information for that shows me some data about like referrals to the mediation program or direct referrals to this OJA funded attorney program, I would like to better understand that. So you showed us that you have some data to share with Sarah. If there's just more that supplements that, it'd be helpful to have a fuller picture of that. And then it was also noted that in 2024, the court has seen a 15% increase in dismissal orders due to cases being inactive for an extended period of time. Is that just an administrative function where administratively the court is looking at cases that haven't had activity for a period of time and then issuing orders of dismissal? Can you just help me understand how you get to that and why is it a benchmark worth noting?
It's my understanding that that is something that the courts undertook to make sure that eviction cases that were pending, that were unresolved for certain length of time, got dismissed, rather than letting them hang out there so that people show evictions pending or otherwise. Those were discussions between Brandy and the judges, and I don't have the particulars of that. So.
Okay, I think that that's good progress. I'm curious, sort of like how, if there's a process in place for how frequently we are assessing for that and determining like the appropriate benchmark to then do those dismissals.
I think that's an ongoing process. That's a benchmark that's been set and being monitored.
Okay, thank you. Okay, those are all my questions, commissioners.
When it comes to eviction resolution, are you tracking like improved mental well-being?
So I don't know that there's a mechanism for us to track that. When somebody leaves the court, we don't see them again. Hopefully we never see them again, that all of their issues with the court are resolved, but otherwise we wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know. Okay.
I would say I don't know that we have a measure for that, but the information that's being provided when the summonses are served, I think is intended to address that. It's making people aware, here's the process, here's other resources, here's possible assistance. I mean, it's a way to give them information, which I think is hopefully the most helpful way to address some of those issues. But I don't know that there's a measure for it.
Okay. I'm trying to understand like a behavioral health impact for eviction resolution.
Again, I think that's the referral to sources, and I should not speak to information that I'm not clear about, but when I was looking at the language that Commissioner Reed was asking about, and the referral and savings in services, I think what's being referenced there is Adelaide and the volunteers directing people to these outside resources. And I don't know how they came up with those measures, but Catholic Charities, the food pantries, Independence Inc., all of those sorts of outside agencies that the Shelter, Willow, Homeless Resource Center that have, I don't know to what degree they address some of those issues. But
So I guess then my follow-up question would be, Sarah, I think I heard you say that the eviction resolution coordinator is funded out of the general fund? Is that
Currently
right?
50%.
Is 50%, and then
Right.
the other 50% is grant funded?
Yeah.
Is that what I
The
heard?
grant's going away.
And the grant is going away. Okay.
So if we want to keep the position, the request is to fill the other 50% with, make it 100% general fund supported.
Okay. So my question is, if we have, if we're tracking or if our partners are taking a look at outcomes related to mental health or behavioral health, because we do see an impact related to their well-being, do we have an opportunity to fund this out of the mental health tax?
I think it'd be, the use of that fund is up to the commission. I wouldn't have I don't know any way to track, like you walk in, do you have a mental health disorder? So you get charged to this versus you don't, so you get put over here. So I think it's ultimately up to the commission if they feel that it is in alignment with the behavioral health sales tax.
Because when we take a look at the behavioral health sales tax, it's focused on an integrated system. And so I think what I'm hearing is that the work that you all do is fairly integrated.
It
Correct
is,
me,
but
or can you talk about that? Tell me if I'm wrong. Or just talk about like the integrated work that you do together to impact the lives of the individuals that you serve.
I may be talking past your point, but it's the referral to the rent utility assistance, giving information on how to prepare, suggestions for how to access legal advice, food pantries, rental and utility assistance, eviction resolution program, contact information, explanations on how to address maybe help with rent or utility bills. I mean, I don't know to the degree to which any of those resources address specifically the mental health impacts of.
Yeah, and those resources, Commissioner, are in the general fund. I mean, so HSC is in the general fund. It's not in the behavioral health fund. It's so that would be a further stretch of how we viewed the behavioral health fund, in my view.
Commissioner Anderson, if I may.
Yeah.
I think, well, one thought is that I think, some of the points you're bringing up, those are conversations for us as a commission to have once we begin our deliberations, certainly, in that how we all think about the different funds and the way that we allocate resources to them. To your question about, whether or not the court in particular is really part of an integrated system, I can't speak for the court, but I will share my experience as somebody who works within the courts or is familiar with them, and that they are not integrated into other services in the way that we think about with our social services and healthcare system. The district court is so their functions are so narrowly prescribed and outside the authority of the county commission, right? And so like we fund programming, we fund the court's functions, and then sometimes additional programming that we ask for the court to sort of participate in to a point, but there is significant limitations to the court's participation in much community-based, more integrated programming. And so in that way, I think it does make it difficult to think about them in the same way that we think about kind of all of our community partners, especially community-based behavioral health, health and human services based partners. There are some distinctions there that I think are part of the conversation. And to me, and as far as evictions go, like I think that there is a much larger conversation for us as a commission and this community to have about effective ways toward preventing evictions and intervening on them. And the court's role in that is exceptionally limited. It has to be by the nature of the court's role. And so I think that we have to look at other ways to be thinking about what does eviction prevention in our community look like. So those are some thoughts I have out loud since you brought up some of those questions.
I appreciate that. And so you're thinking there are other ways to think about it within an integrated system that could foster meaningful outcomes within the population. Okay.
And if I may follow up on that, as you were asking me the question, I was trying to think about what does she mean by the term integration, and hearing Commissioner Reed, I appreciate the comments. Just worth saying, the court is there as an impartial, fair forum for both sides to reach a resolution to the specific legal issue that they've brought forward. So we don't want to be perceived as advocating for one side or the other, or putting our fingers on the scale for one side or the other. We've got to keep our focus on here's the limited purpose for which courts exist. To the degree we can create a self-help center, create an eviction program that keeps that balance in mind. But yes, there's significant limitations on how we can step into the role. So appreciated the comments, and I was thinking that as you were asking me. So
Thank you.
Any other questions for district court? Okay. Oh, yeah,
Not on that request. Or are you talking about the other request for district court?
I was good to go on to it. Are you still on district court?
Yes.
for that sync supplemental.
Don't have a particular place to start with this other than, are there standards of pay that we're trying to match, or are we kind of out on our own finding where that would be? You mentioned Kansas Legal Services is proposing an increase.
Kansas Legal Services brought it forward, I think, as a representative of the entire sync panel. They've been a long-serving member. I should say Bryn Blair is present with Kansas Legal Services today, and Ms. Danielle Davies, a member of the sync panel, also present. I know they'd be willing to address any questions or provide additional information to help me answer or answer directly. But yes, it's an equity, looking at what other people who are asked to accept appointments for the court. I thought KLS did a very good job of providing a comparative report for the county commission to consider. Since I've been an attorney, I think the original bids rate that I remember, and when I came to Douglas County, the county paid rate for attorney services was $40 an hour. And it turns out, according to KLS information, that's kind of where they remain, but that was 20 years ago. It's now $120 an hour. And for whatever reason, for whatever the mechanism might be, that when we would think about increasing rates, it's always the focus on criminal appointments. And so I appreciated the opportunity to consider this in that sort of comparative way.
And so in terms of the sync panel, like how does that correspond with other panel attorneys and their pay? I'm just trying to place this kind of in a larger context.
I'm happy to let Ms. Blair address.
Yeah,
But
I may take a stab at this, and then if I'm
yeah,
incorrect, we will we have other people to correct me. I believe that similar to what Judge McCabery was just saying, when we look at kind of the average hourly rate, this particular panel, I'm thinking about the average amount of time that these attorneys spend on these cases. We were looking at currently we reimburse at about $40 an hour. The bids rate a couple of years ago got for felony criminal defense was increased to $120 an hour. For our district court, we also then increased our panel misdemeanor criminal defense rate to the same $120 an hour. This proposed pay rate, I believe, brings our sync panel attorneys at or closer to that $120 an hour. So that's kind of, I think historically, at least over the last several years, that's where we've tried to stay. We've thought about, at least on the criminal side. So this would bring this group of civil or of the sync attorneys up into that same pay rate, from my understanding.
And to be clear, they're not paid at an hourly rate. We're converting monthly into what we're estimating hourly.
Yeah, which that is for these particular attorneys, they just get a stipend each month. So certainly there's probably times where that rate would be lower. And it's probably another option to consider too, where you do they do vouchers, right? And reimburse at a specifically hourly rate. But we were requesting at least to keep the monthly stipend, but at least bump it up to where it's a little more similar to what we've also done for our misdemeanor panel attorneys.
If I can speak to my perception of that, the sync panel has been pretty consistent. They are experienced attorneys. They develop relationships with community providers. They develop relationships with each other. They have familiarity with sort of who's who in the process of the sync case itself. And so, you know, to me, as an attorney, the appeal of not having to submit vouchers, having that steady monthly income that you can depend on, I think is a strong encouragement for them to remain on the panel. And that's an incentive that I believe we should keep in place, because I don't think that there could be greater efficiencies than having that sort of core group of people who are dedicated to this particular aspect of the legal practice, which is not something, in my experience, a lot of people have depth in. And so it brings the monthly amount is an incentive on top of the hourly rate, in my view. I don't know if council wants to speak to that or offer anything, but to the extent there's that distinction between vouchers and a monthly stipend, that's also something we do with our specialty courts. BHC and drug court are also on a monthly fee, and I think for similar reasons.
And Commissioner, I would add, when I was looking at this request, like there is capacity under existing budgets inside district court. The juvenile, they haven't really hit their budget capacity. So that was also a factor to me, is that I think, the judge has ability to set rates, but the question is though, but are you going to add budget to their department for it?
Yeah, meaning we could go again with what they've got. The supplemental request is what we're asking for the increase on. Is that?
I'm saying, like, inside, this hits the juvenile panel attorney line. You guys never come close to hitting your budget in that.
Right.
And then you also have room inside legal defense. So that was part of my consideration, is that there is capacity inside the existing district court budget that perhaps some of these things could be done, but not necessarily budget added, just as a consideration.
Got it.
That's a nice segue to my question for the district attorney. Hi, Dakota. How are you? Good. So you're requesting for additional staffing, about $210,000. I'm looking at the actual budgets for the district attorney's office. And what we've seen is fairly significant increases every year. There was one year that was a little down between 2022 and 23, but it's a double-digit increase, 11%, 10%. And we started in 2022 at the budget was 2357, 2,357,000. And now the budget we have for 2026 is 3.5 million. That's a significant increase. Did you tell me the process you went for looking at these two positions to make sure, as you're new in the office, that you didn't have the budget capacity to do these new positions by reorganizing, but instead needed to make a supplemental request to the commission?
So I'll address the first, which would be, I think, the attorney request. The attorney request would take the 0.4 attorney and make that a full-time FTE. So that's a little bit of a unique historical situation where we had a charging attorney, Ted Baird, who was full-time and then went to part-time with a higher salary based upon the fact he had benefits through the becoming eligible for Medicare. So he no longer needed insurance. So they negotiated a higher rate for him, but took him from a full-time employee down to a 0.4 employee. So part of it is recalibrating that back to a full-time employee based upon our needs internally and what we have gone through over the last 6 months, staffing up and we're watching caseloads for our attorneys, watching what they are covering, what they're not covering. We have a charging attorney that will be starting next Monday, who will also be handling high-level felonies, trainings, and doing a large amount of mentoring and second chairing. That's the specific role that this is considering. The other consideration for the attorney position was that the 0.4 is Ted was a unique situation, to say the least. Finding an attorney who'd be willing to come on at a 0.4 level has not been something that we've been able to do. We've explored that option over the last 6 months, talking with either retired or attorneys who work part-time for other jurisdictions. Given the nature of the position, it's a daily responsibility. It's a in-custody charging, out-of-custody charging. You have to do weekend charging as well. That made it such that we could find people who'd be willing to do projects, but not willing to do the day in, day out work that the charging attorney required. So for that supplemental request, the main consideration was the ability to hire and the needs of the office. The ability to hire, having a full-time position makes it far easier to hire that position. The other, and like I said, we have someone coming on starting next Monday, the 14th. We will also be, we have 2 offers out to former interns who are taking the bar in a few weeks, and they have offers that are contingent upon passage of the bar. At that point, we will be fully staffed plus. And so we are in the process of determining needs and capacity. We still don't have 2 attorneys spots filled because they are out waiting. But based upon what we've looked at for our numbers this year, we are charging at a higher rate. We're filling a backlog of charging as well. So I think for where we were as of today compared to where the office was as of today in 2024, we're about a little over 100 cases ahead on the criminal side. Juvenile has seen a sharp uptick because there was a large backlog. And so from a capacity and need perspective, we are charging more cases, we're involved in more cases, and we're trying to get staffed up to be able to handle those cases. So that's the genesis of that request, is both the need for what we've seen internally and then the difficulty hiring a 0.4 FTE attorney for daily responsibilities.
So the relationship between the county commission and an elected office is a particular one in that it is up to you to determine how to best use your staff. As a county, like all that you told me, that's your job to figure out what you need. Our job is to figure out how to budget in a way that gives you the support. We're not seeing double-digit increases in, our revenues. But your request is for double-digit increases in revenue. So my question isn't like so much what they're doing and why it's important. I'm sure it is. That's your decision. But why should we? How can you not make it work within your current budget allocation? Why do you need a supplemental increase for that?
Part of that has to do with staffing issues regarding the merit pay and the salary survey that was completed in 2024. So there was an increase in salary that made our office, I think, more competitive locally with offices in similar situations. I'd point to Wyandotte, Shawnee as being more comparable to our office in terms of size and the pay range that they have for both operations staff and then attorney staff. So that's part of the reason. I'd also say that I think the supplemental request that we're looking at here, the totals, I want to say is roughly $230,000. Based upon that the budget was for 2025, that my understanding would be that would be roughly a 6% increase, given that the budget is at 3.5 million. But previously, I know there's been year over year in the budget line items, or the budget, it's been a double-digit increase. Going back and looking at those budgets, then with actual expenditures due to staffing, due to the lack of staffing often, those numbers have come in far under what was actually budgeted. So I think what we're going to see is both the need based upon the goals and the priorities of this office changing, and I think being more involved in day-to-day charging, more involved in making sure there's no backlogs, prosecuting cases that need to be prosecuted, increases the total number of cases, but we're also seeing our staffing levels getting back up to where they would be appropriate based upon the number of cases coming in. I can speak to what the first 6 months of my administration has looked like, which has been a large amount of triage as we get staffed up, which means that while you can physically keep the doors open and keep running the office, there's lots of priorities and lots of safety concerns that get dropped or get put on the back burner that I would say would be necessary to have more staffing to address. Charging has been doled out on a weekly basis often to people who are on call. I've been handling weekend charging. I did it again over the 4th of July weekend. We are staffing in a way that would not, I think, normally be the best practices and not normally be how an office would be staffed. That being said, I think we are also seeing, and this is a large part to do, I think, with what the commission has done over the last 2 or 3 years, both in response to requests from the office and I think as a general salary survey matter that has lifted salaries across the county. We have seen the ability to recruit and retain folks be improved greatly based upon the salaries we can offer right now. The positions we have as well, I think we're trying to be more transparent with where this money is going. We have monies for temporary clerks. We haven't hired a temporary clerk don't have plans to hire a temporary clerk for 2026. I think it's a $40,000 line item. If that was going to go into the fund for the legal assistant, that would be, I think, more accurate as to what we'd be looking to hire as opposed to temporary help, a full-time employee that would have benefits, would be here long-term, could learn the job. Oftentimes there are promotions internally that we see too with the operations staff. So moving that over from a temporary position to a full-time position is the goal of our office too, is to have more transparency about where money is being spent on and where it's being spent.
That's helpful. I'm glad you highlighted the fact that market and merit is included in your budget proposal and that this is supplemental on top of that. So,
correct.
When we look at just as a commission, one of our challenges is to look at that. It feels like it's separate, but it hits each department individually. And just from my perspective, I really ask each department to see if they can operate within that, because that's what we've done for if every county department came to us and said, we need beyond that to operate. That's not about a specific program. It's just about operating your functions. I really ask those departments to look very carefully at their budgets and see if there's other places, the temporary work that you might be having done, that you can look for those funds. So,
and we've looked at that internally as well. One of the things that we've done, and I think especially with the operations side of this request for our second supplemental, is that, and I know this from being on doing the high-level juvenile work as a defense attorney, being involved with that for the last 5 or 6 years, there have been, I think I can count on one finger the number of jury trials that occurred in the juvenile setting. we're in a position now where we're now setting for jury trials and juvenile cases on a monthly basis, if not weekly basis. That's where the need is not based upon any internal just decision-making regarding, we just need more staffing. It's that we've taken on new priorities in terms of actually moving forward on juvenile cases. So on the operations side, having an attorney, a legal assistant who can deal with those cases specifically, prep them for trial, work with the attorney to get those ready for trial. That's where we're seeing this need. So it's in some respects, it's a responsibility this office has always had. It just hasn't had the staffing and or funding to address that issue, and has let that kind of go by the wayside while it triaged and spent money, I think, and resources on high-level felony cases opposed to juvenile cases. My opinion and my experience is that if we want to do long-term harm reduction and long-term cost savings, we'd be much better off spending and treating juvenile cases as seriously as we treat adult cases and getting interventions as soon as possible. A lot of those interventions will be immediate intervention programs, diversion programs for juveniles, getting them into mediation with our partners and getting them into services. But there are a number of cases, I can think, we're charging and filing cases involving high-level sex crimes and high-level person felonies involving juveniles that need to be going to trial and have not done that for some time now based upon the staffing and triage nature of the office.
Thanks. Any other questions for the district attorney? Yeah.
Good morning. I am just curious about how much, maybe so far this year, if you know about how much you've spent on contractual work, because you mentioned that being something you've leaned on without this specialized assistant attorney. Do you have a sense of how much that is continuing to cost you? The line item you have budgeted for, it was 65,000 for 25, and it looks like you want to bump that up by 10,000. So can you just talk me a little bit through that? And maybe there's other contractual work that you want to highlight too.
I'd love to. Part of that is a little unknown because it depends if cases that we have special prosecutors for are going to go to trial. I can say this, we did renegotiate. We had one special prosecutor contract that was a carryover from the previous administration. So for 2024, I think that was 11 months out of that year, there was a special prosecutor contract starting in February of 24 that was budgeted for $5,000 a month, flat fee, regardless of hours worked. And then any hours worked beyond that retainer were charged at, I think, $425. So we have renegotiated that. We're only paying for the hours worked now, opposed to a flat $5,000 a month. So for the year, we would have been paid, I think we would have paid out $30,000 at this point, or $35,000. That case is still ongoing. I think we actually paid out roughly 12 or 13 on that based upon those changes. And then we additionally had to hire another special prosecutor recently to handle a matter that was conflicted, our office is conflicted out on due to disciplinary issues. And so that has led to us hiring another special prosecutor at $200 an hour with no retainer other than there's a natural retainer of $10,000. That's our money. And then every hour gets taken out of that. So there's no minimum that will be paid by our office to hire that special prosecutor. The issue in those is that I can tell you how much we've spent so far. If they go to trial, those will be very expensive because of just the hours involved in trial. So I think as of today, we've spent roughly $14,000, have a $10,000 retainer that's out, but that's not really an expense yet because we haven't had to pay any submitted bills on those. It's just $10,000 that's been transferred to the trust account of the special prosecutor for that case. I don't anticipate the need for a special prosecutor, but I anticipate the need for the special prosecutor for this matter. What I would say is that the other issue on the contractual, based upon it's all kind of ties together. We're working through a contract for an internal auditor for our, we have 3 separate accounts that are not part of the county budget, but they're part of the district attorney's budget that come from different sources, consumer protection, asset forfeiture, there's a custodial account. Based upon what we've discovered through the first 6 months, we think it's best to hire an auditor to go through those as well. So that's part of the supplemental or part of the request we have there regarding the contractual services. But I don't think there's part of the issue there, and why the number is so high, I think was there's a historical reason for that in terms of prior administrations. But for us, it's because we don't know if things are going to go to trial or not. And so the other thing that would come out of there potentially is additional costs if we, like for experts and things like that, would also come out of that contractual line item for special prosecutors.
Okay, thanks.
Can you talk a little bit, if your supplemental requests were not to be funded, what sort of risk do you see to your department, to the staff, but also to the county, the population that you serve? But I also heard you say that maybe you're not, you maybe have a backlog of cases, or you're not addressing cases like juvenile sex crimes, I think I heard you say. So what would be the risk to that population that is potentially not being resolved?
So what I would say is that, I'll start with the backlog portion of this. There was for juvenile crimes, juvenile cases, there was a backlog of juvenile cases that had not been reviewed and charged. We have, I think, worked through, with the exception of newly submitted affidavits, that entirety of that backlog, which has led to filing more juvenile cases. It also has led to declining those cases, but having contact with the families, the victims, and those to let them know what's going on, what we're doing with those. So every time we have a case like that charged, obviously there's work to be done with that case going forward. But when we decline those cases, there's also work to be done to meet with families, let them know about that. So what we're doing right now internally, we are charging those, we are staffing those appropriately with an attorney. What we were requesting is to have an operations staff member who can dedicate their time to those juvenile cases and help assist the prosecutor who's handling those to better prepare, better make contact with families and law enforcement to try those cases and to get them resources. The other thing that happens on these, and this is what we're trying to avoid, is prioritization of certain cases over others. But from a public safety perception or public safety view, the goal here is to make sure that we have the resources and staffing to address all the cases that come into our office in an appropriate manner. That does not mean that each case would receive the exact same amount of time and services. A complicated drug overdose case, like we're trying right now, requires far more resources than a traffic ticket or a misdemeanor battery. That being said, the goal is for office to not have to make the choices about what cases to treat appropriately, but to have the resources to handle all the matters that come into our office in an appropriate manner so that everyone gets their fair value in terms of justice, their fair value in terms of our office's resources and efforts. From a public safety perspective, one of the things that the main concern I have is the impact of turnover in our office on public safety and on the well-being of the victims and families we serve. If we can avoid constant turnover, both between staff, operational staff and attorneys, which has been kind of the norm the past 3-4 years, you avoid having 4-5 attorneys handling the same matter. You avoid families having to do a whole new introduction each time that their case gets handed off to another prosecutor. We have dealt with that this first 6 months because we've been hiring folks and been bringing new people into the office. So there has been, some handoffs that have gone on there, but it's been with an additional staffing opposed to prior administrations would have had to do attorney leaves and you bring someone else in, hopefully, and there's no handoff, there's no ability to work on that case with the person who was there previously. But I can tell you from conversations with our staff, conversations with defense counsel too, who work with our staff, especially attorneys, that a lot of the attorneys who remain in the office from the previous administration were tasked with doing more caseload, had a larger caseload and a larger serious caseload than is recommended by the National District Attorney Association, by the National Bar Association. Their caseloads were such that they were triaging, and that was leaving them, I think, very vulnerable to burnout, very vulnerable to leaving to take a job that would not be as stressful, not be as impactful on their health. So having these cases staffed appropriately internally, having the resources necessary to allow our attorneys to focus the time and resources needed on each individual case and not be burned out is a big reason behind this request. And that burnout obviously impacts how that you handle cases, but it also impacts whether or not you stay in the office. And then we are spending time and resources on those the hiring process, getting new folks in, retraining, and we're trying to avoid that by this. The other part of the supplemental request for attorneys is there is some natural turnover with 15, 16 attorneys. You're going to have people leave every once in a while. Having the 0.4 go to a full-time means that those transactional costs are decreased because we're fully staffed and we lose an attorney, it's far less damaging than if we're at 12 attorneys and lose an attorney, or we're continually losing folks because of burnout. So a lot of this is to do with maintenance. A lot of it is to do with making sure that our attorneys are staffed at an appropriate level so they don't burn out and they don't turn over frequently, and we can continue to have continuity of care for cases as they go through the system.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, it's 11 o'clock and we have Kansas Holistic Defenders here. I feel like we probably need to keep going with this group. And then those of you who are here for your 11 o'clock appointment with Heritage and Land, we'll be with you as soon as we can. So questions for Kansas Holistic Defenders, commissioners?
Yeah, I have a few. Can you describe out of your total client caseload, how many people have mental health issues?
Your Honor. This is a good question. So I think there's two ways to answer this. One is what portion of our overall experiences mental health issues related. And I think there's a second group that is much easier to answer, which is the clients that we have in the jail. So I'll start with that second group first. Due to the investments that the county has made in, pretrial release, reentry, a tremendous amount of resources have gone into making it so that by and large, and certainly compared to municipal court, the court is not usually relying on bond to secure release. Those of our clients, especially on misdemeanors who are in jail, we would estimate probably over 90% of them have a severe and persistent mental illness that is part of the reason why they have been unsuccessful on the pretrial release. So that population, and ultimately I think about, and I have to check the statistics, but ballpark about 10 to 15% of our clients are in custody. So that's sort of that group, which is, I think, one of the most important groups to tackle. And related to the social worker, I think where we would be focusing most of that social worker's time is on that group. That is overwhelmingly people with mental illness, people with substance use disorder, or both. Of our clients as a whole that have mental health issues, again, I don't have I could query our system because we do at intake screen, do people have a diagnosis? But I would estimate that at least 50% of our clients on misdemeanors have mental illness, either that they are being treated for, have been treated for in the past, or are in need of treatment for. So overall, the proportion is fairly high. Although, a significant number of our cases are also DUIs, which are not, which don't often have the same sort of severe persistent mental illness, much sort of broader swath of the population that commits that offense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. The other question I had regarding your supplemental is, have you talked to other social service agencies about stationing a social worker at your office?
Yes, this request actually, I mean, part of this request actually came out of last year's presentation, in which I had a follow-up conversation with then CEO Patrick Schmidt of Burton Ash, saying, look, how do we deal with this issue where our clients, who are in the highest needs category may need additional supports, getting mental health services, getting into programs when their behavior or some other reason disqualifies them from programming that they had been receiving at Burton Ash, and we have to find, and they have to find an alternative to those things. And so out of that discussion, it was suggested, well, we could do something similar to the RAP program, in which a Burton Ash employee would be stationed within our office, and they would be able to bill. They hadn't explained to me at the time exactly how the mechanism worked, but I know now. But the idea was they would be able to subsidize the cost of that about 50%, was their estimate. And so I said, that is phenomenal. And we worked on trying to explore how that would work. And we got additional funding from the Navigation Fund of a very significant general operating fund. I went back to Burton Ash at the beginning of this year to say, great, I think we have the other half of this funding. Can we do this? And at that time, it was real to me that that funding model that they had anticipated would be used here, that is billing to the insurance, was not going to work because our clients by and large are uninsured. And so understanding that that mechanism was no longer available to subsidize the cost of this, so the short answer is yes, we had initially envisioned this as a partnership directly with Burton Ash, whereby their resources could subsidize the costs of this, and that did not materialize.
The other question I had, you said about 90% of the people incarcerated have mental health issues. 50% of your other clients, approximately, could have some. So what percentage of your clients are in jail, and then what percent are not?
I can actually pull up a more precise number if you give me just a moment. It appears, roughly about, at this moment, assuming that everyone has entered their bond information correctly into our system, it appears that about 15% of our clients are in the Douglas County Jail.
The other question I had, I think you mentioned earlier, you're seeing at least momentarily everybody who has an eviction. Have you seen that piece of your work grow over the last few years?
Yes. So now we have 2 grants that serve eviction defense in Douglas County. One is through OJA. Another one is a program that we'd previously located in Shawnee County that provides civil legal services to families in the areas of eviction defense, pre-eviction or other sort of housing issues, benefits denials, appeals, and IEPs. We are definitely seeing an uptick in evictions. The one thing is that this hasn't necessarily raised the overall caseload on the eviction defense side, and because there's also a fairly low rate of people showing up to that answer docket, right? But, as private equity has been buying up more of the housing in Douglas County, we have seen some very large low-income housing providers, especially mobile homes, doing significantly more evictions in the county. And I believe that trend is likely is a trend that's happening nationwide, and something that we're likely to see as economic and social conditions continue to worsen.
One final question. If we couldn't fund all of your supplemental requests, would partial funding benefit you in any way?
Yes, I think as you can see, at this point, the direct funding from Douglas County is less than 50% of our total budget, which is obviously a big change from when it was our our most significant funding. We have a strategy to do more fundraising and to be pretty aggressive there. But the largest single funder outside of a services grant is the Navigation Fund. This is a fairly new national funder, but what I understand from their priorities is they're interested in capacity building. If we are able to go back to them for renewal, it's a $700,000 grant over 2 years, so it's $350,000 a year. We're able to go back and say, look, with the money you gave us, we were able to match some of it from the county, really any of it. I do think that makes that funder more likely to want to continue to invest in Douglas County when they can see that the county is being a partner there. And this outside funding is frankly really necessary. I mean, for any given position right now, the county only funds 90% of the actual cost of that. So an example would be an attorney. We pay $72,000 in salary towards our attorneys. The county pays $65,000 of that. And compared to, say, the DA's office, where a first-year attorney, I believe, is making $88,000, our salaries are significantly less than comparable. So until and unless that funding increases year over year, as seemingly every other county position does, certainly our rent that we pay to the county is going up a percentage every year as well. I think this is possibly a question for next year. We're okay this year, but if we don't have a mechanism for increasing that year over year, then the only way we sustain operations is by continuing to engage in outside funding. So an investment of even $30,000 of county match for this position would go a long way in showing funders that the investments that they're making in Douglas County are something that's supported by the county and the community.
Thanks.
When you report to your funders, what sort of outcomes do you report?
This is a great question. It depends on the grant. So we have our one of our grants, the OJA grant, we primarily report a number of cases and outcomes of those evictions. Are we getting dismissals? Are we having successful relocations? Those things. One of our grants, the Family Legal Services, not only includes the actual cases, but we're partnering with Arnold Ventures and the Harvard Access to Justice Lab to study longitudinally, do families who receive those services they in fact use a metric like I think you were describing, the Protective Factors Survey 2, which does measure sort of mental well-being as a result of receiving these services. And that study is taking place over 2.5 years, comparing those outcomes. So those grants have quite a lot of reporting. And we do obviously monthly and quarterly and annual reporting for the county with a bunch of metrics that are part of the contract. With the Navigation Fund, though, a somewhat unusual and frankly surprising piece of these large foundations is that unlike government grants, their reporting isn't extremely granular. It is not, it is an end of the year narrative. Are we matching broadly? And especially because the funding is for general operating, gives us quite a lot of latitude on how we make use of those funds. And so the short answer is it depends widely on the grant funder on a scale from a federal grant, which is, every single month, every single minute needs to be accounted for, to a private foundation, which is much more end of the year wrap up. Does that answer your question?
It does. So if the funding were to be approved, we could maybe partner together to take a look at what some of the metrics would look like moving forward, so that we could partner on the outcomes, and then maybe also on that protective factor metric as well, protective factor metric.
I think,
we would possibly be really, really interested in understanding more about that and maybe how you're utilizing that or how your funders are actually utilizing that metric.
I think that's, oh, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna, under his existing payment under his existing contract, we can ask that of this service partner. I wouldn't tie it to
Absolutely.
his supplemental
Understanding
request.
his existing, but also just understanding the metric in general and how it's being utilized.
I think it would make sense to incorporate this under some of these existing reporting, especially with, the nice thing about our case management system is that we track a lot of information. We're pretty flexible in what we can track. And so not only to Sarah's point about, wanting to find other funding, I very truly am continuing, as I think we've demonstrated through our fundraising strategy, trying to build the evidence base to find other partners of funding. For instance, Kansas Health Foundation has in the past been very interested in things that increase people's access to benefits and services. There are, part of the areas of the work that we're looking into is helping get more of our clients on SSDI. That process can take 2 years, but I have clients who, if they had gotten on SSDI 2 years, we'd started that process 2 years ago, they would not be homeless potentially. And so I do think that there are other funders that may be interested in supplementing this if we do have the runway to build a base of evidence of what it does. But the evidence base in general for social workers and public defense is fairly well established. But I do think that there are continued opportunities for developing that and continuing to seek outside additional funding to supplement the program so that we're not just, so you're not in a situation where it is a ticking time bomb for the county.
Okay, so I think the follow-up question that I would have that maybe you could think about would be some of those metrics and outcomes. And then maybe just follow up with Jake and Sarah.
We already have a lot of those metrics for them in their service update report. So we can share that with the commission. And I just want to encourage that for our responders, that we're running behind. So if we can keep our
Thank you.
responses short. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Sam, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what this navigation fund, what does it cover?
So it is not an earmarked grant. It is not, you have to spend this for this. Essentially, it's general operating. So right now, what we are spending this on, or plan to spend the funds is we have used part of it to pay for those salary increases to remain competitive, increase retention. We have used, we're using part of those funds to hire an additional attorney. So
how many attorneys do you have who are working misdemeanor cases in Douglas?
Right now we have 4. The county pays for 3 of them. We are hiring, the ideal is going to be to hire 4 attorneys who service the contract, where I am no longer one of those attorneys by and large, and then to be able to fund that additional position by taking on some number of felony appointments as supplemental funding. And also this allows us to promote our attorneys up into higher level cases.
Can you give me an average amount of time that you would say? I mean, I know it's for a misdemeanor case, it's a lot to a little, right? Do you have an average amount that you think your attorneys are working on these misdemeanor cases?
Yes, we do. In the Sarah's going to kill me. I need to so there's a national caseload study, but essentially right now there's an easy and mathematical way to do this. You have 2,080 hours that somebody working 40 hours a week can spend on all of their cases in a year, right? And each of our attorneys is handling 150 cases in a year, which now obviously not all of that 40 hours a week is going to be spent on actual casework. You've got to come to work, you've got to come to meetings. But if we estimate that about 75% of somebody's 40 hours are actually spent on casework, you get, and I should have had this written down already. You get about, we're spending between 7 and 10 hours on average per case. This is much lower than what the National Caseload Survey estimated it takes for a misdemeanor. The RAND study that was completed last year said that attorneys representing clients in misdemeanors should spend 13.8 to 22 hours per case. Now,
Do you mind if I kind of peg on that just a little bit? So you're using just the misdemeanor cases that are covered by
Correct.
your attorneys. You also mentioned that you're taking contract work from bids, and that's the same attorneys, isn't it? So then how does that figure into the number of hours spent on our cases?
So right now, the only cases in which we are taking on felonies are cases where we also have a trailing misdemeanor. The work of doing those two cases is very interrelated, but generally speaking, our attorneys carry a fairly trivial number of felonies. I believe it's perhaps 1 to 2 per attorney right now. But essentially, the case cap that we've arrived at, about 90 cases per attorney at a time, 90 misdemeanor cases for the attorneys that are covered under here, is well below, is much less time per case than is recommended nationally. And the reason we're able to do that is because we are very efficient. We have some support staff that do a lot of the work to make this possible. We use tools like AI transcription to transcribe body cameras to make that faster, but we are at the upper levels right now of what is possible in terms of caseloads with 90 cases per attorney. Now, we're, just mathematically, there aren't more hours in a day. And
Sam,
Yes.
great. We got to watch our time here, so I'm cutting you off, and I'm sorry to do that. Do you know how many misdemeanor cases we have in Douglas County
yes,
that require a public defender of some type, whether that be KHD or the panel?
I do not have that number offhand. I can tell you that in each given year, we represent about between 460 and 500 misdemeanors. And
So the backup information you gave us was 460,
Mhm.
which if you told me you had 4 attorneys is different than your 150 number. So I'm trying to get,
So last year, we had 3 attorneys under the contract.
Okay.
And last year, we did 460 cases.
okay,
And so between 3 attorneys, the 460 is about 153.
okay,
And so now we have a 4th attorney.
okay.
The idea is spreading those cases over 4 attorneys instead of 3.
Get back to my question. How many in Douglas County? Were you getting there? So
So we handle about 400. Oh, how many total cases are there? I don't know. I would say that based on roughly about 20% of cases, I believe, go to and Judge McCabe might know this. Is it 20% of cases that go to the panel?
So I asked my administrators, and what she came up with was in 2025 to date. So 2024 cases, 471 for KHD appointments, 275 for panel appointments. 2025 KHD 255, panel appointments 2025 127. I don't have the total number. Those are all the appointed cases. I don't know what the total numbers of privately retained cases.
So
Can you forward that to us so we can make sure we share it?
So I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I do want to sort of my line of questioning here towards a long-term extension is I think when we look back at 2022 and what the county funded KHD, we were primarily your budget. I mean,
Mhm.
significant amount of your
Yeah.
budget. And I was sort of surprised when I see this navigation fund coming online. You know, I remember conversations back then about what other funding are you getting? I was sort of surprised, and maybe it's the crazy commissioner in me who thinks a budget request might go down at some point, that, you know, that we might get a request for less money as we see more coming on. I believe very much with our community partners, we need to look at multiple funding streams so that it's not totally reliant on one. You've got it, you're starting to get there. Congratulations to KHD, but we're still, what I'm seeing is a level of service that has maintained the same level of service, the same number of cases over those years, but your total operating budget has gone up. So as we look forward, that's what I'd like to explore a little bit, or ask staff to explore a little bit, is what is that we're paying for? Because if the number of clients that we're serving is staying the same,
Mhm.
and yet your total operating budget is increasing, the value our taxpayers are getting for their dollars is diminishing year after year. So, and that probably wasn't the right way to say the value for their dollar, but I want to understand sort of, I felt like in 2022, it was an investment to get this going, and it's stayed the same or increased and now has a supplemental request.
I mean, that's also 12% of inflation ago, right? There isn't a single part of any funding in the county that has cost less to operate over time. I don't think so.
I think he's referring to, like, we ask all of our community partners to,
Right.
invest in braided funding.
Yes.
Now you're bringing that to the table. You're bringing some braided funding in for the organization as a whole, but we don't know what our value has, how our value has changed, because we're still paying the same amount, even though now we're 40% of your
So
budget instead of
the-
a larger percent.
By investing the way that we have, there's a number of things that you're getting out of this. First is that by being able to have the capacity to do felonies, you get greater continuity. You don't have two attorneys showing up on every docket, having to negotiate between two different offices with the DA to have the outcome for a single individual. The second thing is an increase in continuity. So as Mr. Loomis had noted, that there's turnover. If we only have 3 attorneys and one of them leaves, how do we fill that position? We don't pay as much as the DA. We're not funded to pay as much as the DA. So that position historically remains open for a very long time before we even get a single applicant. By having more attorneys than we need to serve the contract, we mitigate having to say take a freeze during that period when there's inevitably going to be turnover. You are also, again, the cost of providing these goes up. There's, DA Loomis said, there's more charging that's happening here. But you're ultimately getting about 460 to 500 cases handled with a very high quality of service over time. That has created a platform on which we are also able to provide other additional services to the county, overlapping some of that infrastructure. So I think I don't think there's a way that it costs less to provide the service, the same service over time under the current economic conditions. I think it's always going to cost more due to inflation, due to other factors.
I'm not going to disagree with you on that, but I do think, as you've seen higher, what we're seeing here in your total operating budget is not an increase in inflation.
Mhm.
It's an increase in the types of support that you're getting from other organizations.
Yes.
And so it's something I think we need to talk about as a commission when we bring on a new community partner, especially if their fundraising percentage is so low, if they're as a nonprofit, what's our expectation over time to how we might be funding them? And do we need to look at a different model for it? You're describing a model there that really talks about, for this number of cases, this is how much it costs. We don't fund you at that model. We could fund at that model, but we sort of give you an overall amount of money and then you operate it that way. That's a different way of doing it. But so I appreciate your answers. You've given me a ton of data, and we'll consider it. Commissioners, any more questions on with Kansas Holistic Defenders? We are running a little behind. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate your time. Commissioner, we had a break. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask our Heritage and Land
Yeah.
Plan partners to come forward so we can kind of try to keep moving.
Thank you all. Good. Having fun with them. These are very low. Come on back, Cheryl. And the tables are big.
Yeah, we're going to need to squeeze more folks in because we've got to bring in all our historical partners. So
Need more chairs.
Another one?
guys, if you could go around the edge there towards the commissioners, that'd be great. Thanks. There's chairs down here. Nope, there, yep, we've got plenty of chairs here. Come on down.
Hi, it's all you.
Good.
Doing good. Family good?
Yeah. How's yours?
Good. They're doing very well. Okay.
Okay. It's 11:34. Thank you for sticking around with us. We're sorry that took so long. This is our Heritage and Land Group, and we have here representatives from K-State Research and Extension Council, our historical societies, and some of you are sitting out in the audience. See, I'm a performer, the gallery, whatever you call it. We have the Heritage Conservation Council, and then we do not have supplementals from Fair Board or Conservation District, but they're included in this group. Sean, oh, there you are, Sean. I didn't see you.
Slid over here.
Okay. Sean, you want to kick off this group for us?
Yep, just a quick introduction. So this is Land and Heritage. What I'd like to do, just because we have a big group, and I know this will take a minute or two, but just maybe go around really quickly so everybody can introduce themselves and the agency that they're with. I'll start with Caitlin.
Good afternoon, almost. Caitlin Amerlin, Heritage Conservation Coordinator for Douglas County.
Steve Novak, the Executive Director of the Douglas County Historical Society and Watkins Museum of History.
Lucinda Adams, Executive Director of Freedom's Frontier.
Ben Terwilliger, Executive Director, Eudora Area Historical Society.
Susie Mooney, Conservation District Manager for Douglas County.
Cheryl Hunsinger, Treasurer for Douglas County Fair Board.
I'm Marlon Bates, County Extension Director for Douglas County Extension Council.
Sandra Hiller, Clinton Lake Historical Society and Wakarusa River Valley Heritage Museum.
Paul Baumeier, Compton Historical Society.
Perfect. Thank you. I do just kind of want to quickly introduce sort of the idea of land and heritage as it relates to Douglas County. I've really just kind of looked at this as three things, or a group of things rather. One is the preservation of our local identity and our culture. The other is the environmental protection and sustainability. And lastly, I want to point out sort of just the economic benefits that all of these groups bring back to the county, both indirectly as a way of quality of life enhancement, but also directly. And I have to show this because I just appreciate it. And I showed Paul before I came in today. There's sort of a recognition again. I think we've probably all seen this, but again, Kansas, the Civil War birthplace, not South Carolina. I did suggest to Paul, maybe we put a billboard outside Charleston to reinforce this idea, but.
Well, I could repeat what I said last year about the person from Baldwin that went to Fort Sumter. And the guide was telling all about Fort Sumter being the birthplace of the Civil War. And the gentleman from Baldwin was shaking his head no. So the guide came over and asked him why he was shaking his head no. And the gentleman from Baldwin said, well, Kansas is the birthplace of the Civil War, not South Carolina. And the guide said this, yes, we know that. But if we told people that, they wouldn't come here.
So again, as you can tell, there's a lot of passion and a lot of vigor behind the work that's done in this space. I think one thing I do want to highlight as far as the supplemental requests are concerned, there is a lot of collaboration going on in this space across our historical societies. Caitlin can certainly speak to that, but I don't want to take too much from that other than to say that that effort is underway, and we look forward to concluding that later on this year and in advance of the 2027 budget deliberations. And then lastly, I do just want to point out the importance of this work as it relates to the World Cup. Just generally speaking, I think that came up in yesterday's conversations, but you will see a supplementary request that I think really reinforces the idea of a legacy effort where we're looking at collaborating across a variety of stakeholders, but again, elevating the story locally, regionally, but also going on to the world stage with the World Cup approaching in 2026. So with that, I turn it over to the commission.
Thank you. I want to check with commissioners to see if we have any time boundaries here in case we go a little over. I didn't do that yesterday, so I apologize. Okay, we're good. Okay. Questions for?
Sorry, do we want to ask our partners the same thing? Because we could release some if we get tackle.
Sure. Thank you, Karen. Good idea. Commissioner Willie, any partners want to leave at 12?
Do you need anything from the Fair Board? Because we're not asking for any.
Maybe start with the Fair Board. Any questions? Yeah. Any questions for the Fair Board?
Start with the Fair Board. I don't have any questions. I appreciate the work you do, and we're coming up on fair time pretty soon.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Fair Board.
Make it easy for you.
I knew someone would take the out.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay. I love how we're doing this. Any other groups you want to ask questions of?
Can we start anywhere? Is that
Sure.
an invitation? I know Conservation District doesn't have a supplementary request, but I think it is worth celebrating that the state, after all these years, has decided to increase their allocation toward conservation districts. They've never lived up to their statutory, they're supposed to match what counties give with a minimum of 25,000. They've only ever given the 25,000, even though Douglas County has been putting in 85. So I just think that is worth celebrating. I had a couple of questions that kind of go with that, if you're okay with it. So this mentioned, currently we've had one full-time employee, one part-time employee. Was the part-time employee that in NRCS Tech that was released by federal statute?
So I do have some more exciting news. We did receive a grant from the Division of Conservation to hire a full-time technician to replace that person. That is a reimbursement grant. So of course, we have to pay them first and then get reimbursed the amount that
they want to reimburse us. You know how that works. We also did receive a small grant for a summer intern, which we did fill. So I do have some help in the office. I'm not the only one in there right now.
But that half position that was mentioned in your report was the
Technician.
NRCS tech that all of the techs across the state, or at least everything in our area, were fired by through the feds. Okay.
Yeah, and so his position was partially funded by us last year before he transitioned over into NRCS. So that's why we had put him as part-time.
Okay. So there's always been an education coordinator, there's been an education coordinator position also for a long time. And because there hadn't been increases in funding from many sources, that position's been vacant. And it looks like you're planning to bring that person back, or someone to fill that role, or an urban ag kind of role.
Correct. We are taking applications for that position at this time.
Yes. And it seemed in my mind that with the additional 50,000, and that was saying that we hadn't been spending that full allocation because one of those positions had stayed open, that the ending fund balance would be higher, that it would have been, that there have been banking some money in that because we've had an open position.
And that's why we're not asking for any increase this year.
But I'm not seeing that in the budget request. It looks like that ending fund balance has continued to go down and is projected to go down again in 2026. So I was just curious about that.
Okay. I'm trying to think here. So our money had been going down because we hadn't banked that money for that person because other expenses have gone up. Wages have gone up. I know Randy, when he was in my position, was not getting paid very much at all. We do still not have healthcare benefits. However, they did start paying out a healthcare stipend to help with that, which I appreciate. But so there's not a surplus. What we were doing was utilizing the money, the increase from the state for that position, which is why it's a part-time position.
Okay. Thanks. I just wanted that clarification.
Yeah, there was no surplus being held.
Okay, that was kind of in my head that there had been a savings there, but I
Right.
recognized
And
that
then
there were other
also
places for that.
NRCS has stopped allowing us to use certain things. So this year, for instance, we no longer are utilizing some of their technology. So I had to purchase a laptop for the upcoming DOC technician, even though they're still going to be utilizing their vehicle and their laser and things like that. We're now providing more of the technology stuff. So there's been some additional expenses that we haven't had in the past because of their changes. And I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like at the end of the year. So.
Right. Thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Any other questions for the Conservation District? Okay, yeah. Oh,
I
go
do
ahead.
have one question, I guess. Is there a reason you didn't ask for more funding?
We did not anticipate all the changes with the government this year, so we did not ask for additional funding. We had anticipated the increase from the state. That's something that's been in the works for several years. And so the board decided at the time that we submitted everything to not ask for an increase. However, I can't guarantee we won't ask for one next year with the way the government's been cutting everything as far as conservation projects and things are concerned. We may need to ask for one next year. We just did not anticipate the broad strokes that they took throughout Kansas here.
So then the remainder of this year, what strategies will you all take to take a look at your funding moving into next year?
We are trying to, how should I say this? We are trying to function right now in kind of like emergency mode. We are recycling everything we can, reusing things. not ordering supplies much because only things that are like absolutely necessary. We are not spending as much on advertising and we don't have as much funds for some of our events. So we are looking at ways to scale back and find more partners. I know KCA Extension has been very generous with partnering with us for multiple events throughout the county, as has both the Wakarusa Raps and the Lower Kansas have also partnered with us in the past to help keep things going as far as education and outreach. And we also have a partnership now with Haskell University as well, as far as the educational events are concerned.
And then will you also be applying for other grants as well, to like build capacity?
Yes, so like I said, we did receive the grant from the Division of Conservation for the technician. We also received a grant for Kansas Riparian Project Initiative of $10,000, but that has to be spent on a riparian projects here in the county. So that will help as far as our cost share funds are concerned. We've also have applied for 2 other grants, but I have not heard back the status of those at this time.
Thank you.
I'm guessing that Department of Conservation grant is probably for the full-time tech. Is that a 1-year grant or is that something that's likely to come back?
They're saying it's a 3-year renewable grant, but in parentheses below it says as funding is available. So that's what's on the contract.
And did your lease ever get figured out? The Conservation District and the rest of the Farm Service lost their lease to a Doge cut.
So we received an email stating that we were going to be able to stay in the same place. However, in our contact with the landlord, he still has not received a contract. So it is still up in the air so far as we know.
Thanks.
I don't see any more Conservation District questions. I want to check in with staff. Maybe I missed an email yesterday. Did you say there was an adjustment to the Extension Council?
Yeah, Commissioners, in the proposed budget, we didn't get the supplemental funding that Commissioners set aside for 2025. We didn't get that put in on the base budget line. We will look to rectify that as we move into budget deliberations. So we'll make that change on your Commissioner worksheet to reflect what you put in for them for 2025 plus the supplemental request that was included in my proposed budget. I'm not going to adjust your lines in your budget because that was the proposed budget and we'll fix it as we move into the final budget.
Got it. Thank you. Any questions for Extension Council?
Marlon, can you go over again the legal requirements between us and the state as far as approving budgets?
I can give that a shot without looking at the statute, Commissioner Dorsey. So KSA 2610 sort of outlines a budget process that includes the Extension Council submitting to the County Commission a proposed budget for the ensuing year. Within a 10-day period, the County Commission is to consider that, and if any adjustments are made, deliver that back to the Extension Council Executive Board, and then they have another 10-day period to resubmit back to Commission, and then you all would do then as you please to finalize the budget for the ensuing year within another 10-day period.
Would our deliberations count as agreement or disagreement with your budget?
So I think last year is a good example to just kind of point to, because what we sort of decided to do is a lot of this sort of just came to light is formally file our budget proposal for next year as close to the July 15 statutory deadline as is practicable, which last year was on July 15th, which actually happened to be the day that you were deliberating our budget. And so, unfortunately, the council didn't meet after hearing your deliberations. So the council just had, their sort of flat funding figure plus the entire supplemental requests that they put in front of you for this year in that proposed budget that was filed at the clerk's office. And then after hearing and seeing your deliberations, the supplemental that you decided to set aside in commissioner items last year was roughly half of what we had asked for in total supplementals. And so I reached out to Sarah and said, hey, do you feel like that's, the sort of direction that we would need to make another adjustment? And she indicated yes. So we held a special meeting to make an adjustment to the budget and then refiled that before the end of the month. So does that help?
Yeah.
I think just maybe for this year, our executive board is about to consider this proposed budget, and we'll take this to the clerk later this week and formally file that. And then perhaps we'll hear your deliberations and if adjustments need to be made. I think I would say, your deliberations tend to land on a final number. And so I think that could suffice. I think if you wanted to have a larger conversation with the executive board of the Extension Council about any, particularly in years where maybe there are significant differences in opinion of what the level of funding should be for the Extension Council, I'm sure that would be welcome.
Any other questions for Extension Council? Thank you, Marlon. We've got Heritage Conservation.
We're not gonna be so lucky, are we?
I have questions.
You want to get your microphone, Steve?
We don't have anyone at the table from Santa Fe Trail, right? And I just wanted to kind of give them a shout out of how much progress they've made. So there's nobody to ask questions of, but they'd had just a string of really terrible luck and someone defaulting on a loan and losing that rental payment and then all of the legal fees to get that back. I'm so excited to see them getting on track. They have an important mission, and I'm glad that I'm glad that they're finding their way through that back to the block. So was one comment or a question, but I'll start with Caitlin, and that's so I know we won't have the results of this conversation yet, but Heritage Conservation has been kind of facilitating talks around the community with Heritage partners. Can you talk about what the purpose of that is and how that's going?
Yeah, so in May of this year, we embarked on starting with a needs assessment to kind of get a bird's eye perspective of the sort of heritage agencies that the county funds. So this has kind of been ongoing from the past several years of budget of, we kind of have these numbers that the historical societies have been at for some time, kind of legacy numbers. And so trying to figure out both, what is the whole landscape in Douglas County? What does the system of historical societies look like? What is the county's role? What should the county's role be? So this needs assessment is first looking at each individual organization, what's missing, where the strengths are, where the weaknesses might be, and also looking at the Heritage Conservation Council and the county's role in all of that. And the hope is that that project will be wrapped up in October. We'd present those results to you all, hopefully this fall, early winter. And then use that potentially as a launching point to do some more in-depth strategic planning to perhaps formalize the roles of both the individual organizations and the county's role. So we're really doing those first steps to sort of have really formalizing the collaborative work that all the folks have really started and really kind of dove into working together and better understanding what the county's role should be as that collaboration increases. And really the goal is to create a more sustainable system in the long term.
So over the last couple of years, we've really seen that collaboration through these groups, and that's fantastic. We've also kind of funded things towards the collaboration, and that's again the request here. And so I guess that's one of my things that I'll be curious about that follow-up is like how well are those resources being shared, and are they meeting needs there? And which we'll have to kind of jump the gun a little bit to have the conversations about supplemental requests before we have that. But are there kind of impressions that any of our partners want to share about how well those resources are being shared? And I think we had, was it collections manager, or was that the kind of the main position that was being shared around?
Yes, that was part of it. And we've been able to provide some help. It all depends on what other organizations are kind of ready to launch. So there may be some projects that we can introduce. We've got the ongoing support for that now. So when the need arises, we're able to step up. One of the other shared efforts that we're doing is to provide staffing for a number of organizations. Well, two more, Santa Fe Trail and the Wakarusa River Valley Heritage Museum, and their personnel expenses, hiring processes, and payroll are passing through our organization. This is now, we've probably been at this for 5 years with the Wakarusa River Valley Heritage Museum. It's our second year with the Santa Fe Trail Historical Society, and that seems to be working really well. We have 4 people on our payroll that are actually working for these other organizations.
Thanks. Do other partners want to comment about what they're getting out of those shared resources? Does it seem fair across the system?
Yeah, I would say it's fair. Steve and the Watkins Museum are always very generous to share what resources they have. The smaller historical agencies like in Eudora, Baldwin, and Lecompton, we don't have quite the same staff and resources that the Watkins Museum has. Sometimes there's only one professional person on staff like in Eudora. So we consistently turn to Steve, and I kind of view him as kind of the leader of the heritage partners in general. So it's greatly appreciated, because otherwise we kind of find ourselves as like little individual islands or isolated. So we're very grateful that we have all this collaboration that didn't exist when I first started here many years ago. So we're very grateful.
Well, I don't know whether Steve has the brochure that he produced, which is an excellent brochure that will be used the next year promoting the 250th anniversary. But of course, with this soccer tournament, it's going to be hopefully rewritten as far as in the language of the country that's here. And it was under his leadership that took place. It's an excellent brochure that he produced. Yes.
I will add one thing. Some of the shared support is literally that. And twice a year, I distribute some of the funds that come from the county directly to the other heritage agencies.
Anyone else have questions, or I can keep? Okay, I didn't organize them very well, however. Might actually need to take a pause on.
Actually, do have a question for Caitlin. And I probably could have looked back on my notes from just a couple months ago when we saw the list of the heritage events and celebrations, and we talked about how there was significantly more requests than what the funding would allow for. 2 questions about that. Do you know how many of those total number of requests that were unfunded, and what the dollar amount equaled that was the total dollar amount requested versus we only had 20,000 to allocate. Thank you, Commissioner. And what was the overage in terms of requests and total number of requests?
Okay. I think it was around 68 to 70,000. I can get that number for
Okay.
you in a minute. And then there was 12 applications. And from my assessment, the council, there was probably 11 of those they would have loved to have funded. Maybe only one that was significantly weaker than the others. All the rest were the council would have loved to fund. But with the small pool of funding available, they did the best with what they could. But yeah, and that was with fairly limited outreach about the program too, because we knew the size of the program wouldn't meet the need in the community. So I would expect that there is much greater need even what we received this year.
Got it. Thank you. And to the best of my memory, this, the Sester Centennial that we have a separate supplemental request for was not one of the events that had requested, right? If it had, it would have been for the full amount, but I just wanted to make sure I'm remembering that correct.
Yes,
Okay.
and for that program in particular, we're really targeting those established annual events, kind of bridging that gap between community partner funding and grant funding, kind of filling a need in between. So that's a little bit different too.
Yeah, I appreciate the distinction. Thank you.
I just want to clarify something, Caitlin, because as you were talking, made me think maybe I'm misunderstanding. The 20,000 that's in the supplemental will be added to the 20,000 that we put aside last year. It's not that 20 is going back in, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way that we design the program is essentially like a 3-year cohort. So folks wouldn't have to reapply every year. So this would add a second 3-year cohort that would then be able to be continued in time.
I was thinking in particular about the Vinland Fair, which used to come through this process. So it's been a long time partner for a stable amount of funding. And then it also changed into be under that celebration. So, I mean, you have organizations applying and only some of them getting through to funding. How do you deal with something like Vinland Fair that has been, a long-term funding partner for Douglas County?
I think that would be a question to the commission because those funds for Vinland Fair were moved over from the budget. And so those are earmarked for them. So that's essentially it'll get routinely annually checked by the Heritage Conservation Council. But that funding is earmarked for them in that sense. So I guess that would be then a question to you all. If there is a similar event in the future that you want to see funded annually, perhaps, then that could be a process that we do that.
Yeah, but I'd say generally, the Vinland Fair was really the only other sort of event like that that the county funded. So I would say this is a new area for us. This is this is increasing our support for community celebrations in a way that we had not paid for in the past.
Well, I appreciate that clarification. I assumed Vinland Fair then had to apply under this kind of limited pool, but they are still kind of held as a stable community partner.
Yeah, we moved them through the process just so we had, the information available, their application available, but that funding was earmarked for them through that process. But we just wanted to update, their information since they wouldn't be submitting a budget in the same way. So I'd hope that that's less taxing for them in the future, having to go through the simpler process. So.
I had a question from a constituent about that particular funding, the celebration funding, if that was taken out of the overall Heritage Conservation Grant funding or if that was additive.
It was additive. Yep. So we basically, you all last year approved the reallocation from our professional services budget for this purpose. So it didn't touch the grant funding at all. That remains the same.
But it didn't increase the budget.
Correct.
Because we reallocated from a non-grant line item to this. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? It did not increase?
It did not increase your overall mill levy budget because we had it budgeted under professional services. We weren't using it there. We used that to create the fund.
Okay. And in this year, it would be additional funds that are requested to add to that.
Yes.
20 grant.
This year it would be additional funds because the existing cohort is committed for 3 years. So if you want to expand beyond that, you would need to approve the supplemental.
I appreciate that. Another question for Freedom's Frontier, unless somebody else wants to take a turn. All right. Hi. So Freedom's Frontier, it's a unique organization that it's generally a federal organization, but also collaborates with our local partners also. it covers many counties, but Douglas County kind of funds it uniquely. And I know you had a lot of things in your report about like what Douglas County gets out of that. But can you put that in a context for me for like other counties? Because they're presumably, getting services also, but they're not paying in and they're just kind of falling under that federal umbrella. So can you talk to us about like why Douglas County pays especially?
We do not have any other counties that contribute to our funding. Douglas County is the only one. But we also have a large proportion of our partners here in Douglas County. So we look at as the way we are building partnerships within our counties, strengthening, and with us having 41 counties, we could have the seat of the heritage area anywhere we wanted to. And we choose to have it in Douglas County because.
I'd also add that very few of those other counties contribute as much to heritage preservation as Douglas County.
Yes.
So they don't have it to match.
Just as an aside, we recently closed our physical office because it was an expensive $15,000 a year that we decided that we could do without. And so now we did have offers to come and office other places, but we are officing at the Watkins Museum in the community room. And so one of the things that we look at with Douglas County is how much the county supports all of the historic sites that are here. And that is why we want to have our headquarters here in Douglas County. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a good start. Thank you. And I didn't realize about the change in location. When did that happen?
About 6 weeks ago or so.
And is there a rent line item on here that will then go down?
That
is, unless Steve's charging as much as the previous building?
No. Donuts. We're bringing baked goods to the Watkins.
Bribery.
That would have been under, I would assume, let me see. I think it's under the admin expenses probably. I'm looking back to Kate. Kate, help me with this. I believe it's under the admin expenses and software fees.
And you said it was about 1,500 a month?
No, it was 15,000 for the year.
Okay, 15 for the year. So do you have plans to reallocate that funding someplace? Maybe 6 weeks is not a long time to make that decision, but it also wouldn't have been captured in here because of timing.
Yeah, so what we have done because of worries about federal funding, we are currently kind of like other organizations, we've stopped spending. We are currently like no travel budget, supplies, things like that. And one of the things that we have decided as an organization to kind of change our mission a little bit and to get more public facing. So we are going to allocate a lot of those funds towards public programming, start having programs at our partner sites. Like one of the things that we already do is help sponsor the Bleeding Kansas series in Lecompton. And so programs like that is what we want to start doing more of, where we can take a program into a site. For Ben, he is one person. We can do all of that legwork. We can get a speaker, we can arrange it, we can have the video available, and then we go into that site and say, would you like to have this program? So we're going to be doing things like that with the funds.
And I assume that collaboration, when you talk about changing the mission, like how much of that do you owe to, kind of the federal umbrella, and how much do you owe to the community partners that are at the table here as far as what that mission looks like?
I think it has a lot to do with the community partners. Douglas County is the only county in the heritage area, and we're 41 counties in Kansas and Missouri, that has a community organization like this between all of the historic sites and partners. We find a lot of times in our field that people are very competitive because you're going after the same collections and the same speakers and things like that. And so what happens here with all of the different historical organization, it really does kind of change what we do because it's so collaborative here.
think it's important to note that if we didn't funnel funds through here, they would not be able to make their match.
Correct.
So then none of this happens. So, and it's by Douglas County funneling their funds through it, you're already doing it. It goes to community partners, but it allows them to demonstrate their match. And without that, they would not be able to meet that match.
That allows us for when we do our fundraising, instead of having to fundraise for that match, we can go to a foundation or an individual with a specific project or a program in mind.
That's why it's always felt like a win-win to us.
And pardon me jumping in here, but then that money, once it's passed through and helps them with their match, comes back to the partners because we can apply for grants. That brochure that you have a copy of, that was paid for by a Freedom's Frontier grant.
And so I think of the Freedom's Frontier kind of the county allocation in two buckets. One is that pass through, which I don't know that you gain any interest or
No, we don't.
It doesn't stay long enough for that.
And we're not allowed to, but through our federal cooperative agreement.
Okay. And the other would be the 9739. That's the direct allocation.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just kind of separating those two in my head.
And that primarily goes towards, we are not, because of our cooperative agreement with the federal government, we are not allowed to really do any kind of lobbying, fundraising, things like that. And so that money can go towards a salary, particularly my salary. So then, because we have to actually keep track daily of what we do. Imagine that, right? So then we can say that that is paid for through the money that we receive from Douglas County.
Okay, one final question there. So looking through your budget request, your salary line item actually is decreasing, but your benefits and health insurance is increasing. You did address kind of the health insurance piece and benefits, but those were a weird thing to see together.
Yeah, we have a staff member retiring at the end of January, and we will not replace her. So we're going to go ahead and use that because right now our grant program is suspended. We've already allocated for this fiscal year and fulfilled our duties for our grant program. And so what we are looking at is by not replacing that position, then we can use those funds hopefully for the grants to fund things like the brochures and the programs.
Okay, I appreciate that context. How many FTEs are there with Freedom's Frontier?
Currently we have 5. And we'll go down to 4 at the end of January. And we are applying for a lot of grants right now, like everybody else. But we have a really good shot, we think, at a grant with the National Park Foundation. They've asked heritage areas to apply, and we're applying to start a fundraising program and then also to do strategic planning.
All right. I didn't even touch the supplemental requests. Is that other people want to ask questions of that? The Karen show. Thank you. So in terms of the supplemental requests, the half of the one FTE collections manager assistant, actually all of these are kind of listed as one time. So the sesquicentennial, that makes sense. We won't see that one again for, a really long time.
That's right. We got another 50 years before we have to do something big.
But especially that collections manager, why is that one time?
Yes. Well, it's one time because my hope is that I will find grant funds that can provide that. When we received the offer from a donor to fund half of the full-time position for 3 years, I went to you last year because there wasn't time enough to secure a grant. The plan had been, and the grant was submitted to the NEH in January, that would have provided the match that we needed for the next 2 years. That grant won't happen. And I was not able to come up with an alternative to replace that in time for the budget cycle here. So I put it in again as a one-time request in the hopes that we would, over the course of this year, find another grant opportunity to be able to support that.
But because it's tied to that match from a donor, that's why I considered it one time, because normally I wouldn't consider a staff position as one time, but this is truly to me, because it's tied to that donor.
And it's a temporary position. Once the work is finished, the job goes away.
Yeah.
This one-time funding is to maintain the status quo from last year's one-time funding, but it's also got the grant match.
Correct.
All right, thanks. I'm sorry about the door.
Yes, I know. There have been a lot of weird things happening at the Watkins building this year.
That's all the questions I have.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. This will close our budget hearing for today. We'll recess until Wednesday, July 9th, when we'll start in at 9 o'clock.